for this workshop session regarding the plans for Elder and Centennial Park. We are trying to record here with Molly, do our best, obviously with limited resources down at the beach. The purpose of meeting here is so that we can see this in context, and we've set up some exhibits to help illustrate relative elevations, and then we're going to go from here to Lloyd, and we're going to see in situ Lloyd. We have a better understanding of how these elevations relate to a finished beach project. Before we get formally started, I would ask for a roll call, or let's just at least announce our presence. The commissioners, Mr. Archambault,
Mickey Archambault,
Eric Lesson,
Colleen Root, welcome.
John Peterson,
Cynthia Rout,
Executive Director.
thank you.
Christina Hodo.
Warren James. So all of your elected officials and the executive director are present, and we have with us our 20-year most valuable coastal journalist to help explain the exhibits this evening.
Warren, thank you. And thank you everybody for attending this evening. Greatly appreciate it. If you have trouble hearing me right now, I would ask maybe we condense a little bit, try to be mindful, but I don't want to be screaming too loud. I'll try to talk as loud as I can. So this evening we brought everybody together and created this workshop meeting. We have a 3-session meeting. Our first one, as Warren suggested, is here at Centennial Park to give a little context to the elevations that everybody has been questioning through this process. From here, we got another session set up at 6 o'clock at Lloyd on the south end there to show you what our latest achievement was there and how it relates to this site here and the differences of that. So you can see 2 perspective views, one of a existing condition versus a finished condition built with stone. I will say at our 7 o'clock session, we have a similar presentation at the Hubbardwood School in the auditorium, where we're going to be presenting a conceptual design plan that is for draft purposes only at this time, that to take into consideration everything that we've heard over the last month and a half from the community and trying to distill down a plan that everybody is comfortable with. We know that we're not going to make the perfect plan for everybody, but we got to take and consider the needs of all and try to work within the confines of what we can. So with that being said, what you have here and represented for about the last week, I'm sure some of you have been down here and saw this, wondering what it is. This is a representation of 3 different points of the proposed plan. The first elevation you're going to see is the yellow string line at the lower end. That is the representation of the proposed sand elevation once the project is completed. That is going to be almost identical when we get to Lloyd, and you'll see if you understand on the actual elevation of sand in comparison. But that is holding at 587, goes out nearly 100 feet, and then tapering out into the lake from there at about a 1-to-12 ratio as it proceeds into the lake. So these sections here, as I'll go through, the first step from the current steel seawall to this first post is 20 feet. Then you'll see an elevation drop in the green line, which is representing the planting pocket itself. That representation then drops down a foot, continues out to the east. This second post is about 25 feet in dimension, but the plan continues out to 30 feet. So from the second post to where the next top would be, it's an extension of about 30 feet. And then what you're going to see is another great elevation increase of 1 foot down to 587. At 587, that steel seawall will continue for another 50 feet until it terminates at a 100-foot barrier. At that 100-foot mark, it will transition from a steel design, what we're calling our planting pockets, and it will transition into a stone rubber-bound breakwater, as you've seen on the lake, and as what we have at Lloyd. We did that for several fronts. One, trying to minimize the impact of stone, and the reason I say minimize the impact of stone is because the top line that is represented here, the black line, is the current elevation of stone per the as-built at Lloyd Beach. So, what does that mean? That means if we were to build the structure that we're proposing here today for Centennial, that if we were to build it out of stone, it would actually be higher than the proposed planting pocket that we all have proposed or have been discussed over the several months. That's just the stone planting pocket. Let me finish the presentation and then I'll open it up to some questions, being mindful of our time though. Everybody will have an opportunity to talk today at 7 o'clock. We have a microphone there. We're recording the night meeting. So that might be a better form to ask questions that everybody can hear you a little bit better. But
We should be able to
we'll get to it.
we should be able to ask questions anytime we want, not just this.
No, I'm not suggesting that, sir. Let me just get through the presentation, then we'll open it up to questions here right now. Just bear with me a moment, please. But as we continue through that rock elevation tapering out, that elevation will carry at 587, and then at the 100-foot mark, it will taper from 587 to 586 at the end of the stone groin, meaning the breakwater itself. We wanted to have a representation to try to show the elevation of the sand. So we brought this small staircase here. It's not ideal, but at least to get you a little higher in elevation to see what that looks like of what the elevation would be if you would be standing at the proposed elevation of sand, which is shown here at the yellow line. Those are the big priority or the big items we're trying to explain here this evening. At this point, Warren, if you have any other comments.
If I could reiterate, the black rope represents what exists at Lloyd. What this board responded to at Lloyd was the massive quantities of stone that were brought all the way back to the bluff edge. It starts at 591 and it tapers down to 587. That's Lloyd. The reason why 587 at the outer elevation, that's coastal engineering to absorb the wave energy. Those rocks out there are of a size, a scale, a mass to resist the waves of Lake Michigan. That's the armor stone. That armor stone gets trucked in from somewhere near Madison. Very expensive trucking, bringing in 2 or 3 of these giant boulders at a time. That's why we were interested in taking a more cost-effective approach and using steel and sand and possibly limestone versus the more expensive quartz. We can't use limestone out in the water. It fractures, lose half of the mass, and then that gets washed away by the wave action. But Lloyd, our response and what we learned from Lloyd, is that there's that massive quantity of stone. We're trying to reduce the height and reduce the quantity of stone. Thus, you see the relationship between the top of Lloyd in black and the proposed top of steel at Centennial and Elder. It's stepping down 589, 588, 587. The sand, you're standing at Lloyd on the beach, at the beach house, the little boathouse right there. That concrete pad is at 587. The lake, Lake Michigan, it varies by about 6 feet. It varies daily, it varies seasonally, and it varies over the years. But unique and perhaps induced by climate change, we saw an all-time recorded low. Let's say it eclipsed the 1964 low back in January of 2013. In January 2013, Lake Michigan dropped below 576. Fast forward 7 years to 2020, 8 out of the 12 months of the year, Lake Michigan was above its recorded high. It was above 582 or 582 and above. We barely missed the October 86 all-time high. Randy, I'm sure you'll attest, there was no beach here in 2020. Waves were crashing against the steel. The beach was closed. There was a 2 or 3 foot drop off from the end of the stairs. Sand is constantly moving. What we explained in the prior meeting is that when you look north, this is an awesome day because you can see the smokestacks. You can see all the way to Waukegan and to Great Lakes Naval Training Center. So sand in Lake Michigan is constantly moving south. It moves with the wind. As Mr. Zabik explained to us, the Army Corps calculates that 225,000 cubic yards of sand crosses the state line every year. That's a lot of sand. But only 14,000 cubic yards, or 6% of it, makes it past Great Lakes Naval Training Center. First it has to go around Waukegan, then it goes goes around Great Lakes, those are 1,500, 2,000 feet out. It pushes that sand into the water. It doesn't come back. So we live in a sand-starved environment. Consequently, what have people done? Fortified the beach. They fortified the bluff to prevent further erosion, which then further starves the system. So as you can see, we're actually kind of in a curve here, and it projects out. Why does Gilson have such a great beach? Because there's a promontory there. Every time you introduce a promontory, you collect sand. We have it in Tower. That power plant was built in 1880. So that steel revetment has been out there for a long time, catching the sand. That's why at Lloyd, just south of it, we had no beach. We had emergency action with 100-year-old trees falling into the lake back in 2020. So Lloyd lives in a sand-starved environment. We replenish the sand. The Army Corps, the IDNR, they govern anything that gets built on the lakefront. They will require us to do the coastal engineering to bring up the sand level and overfill it by 20% so that we can reproduce sand into the system. We're not starving our neighbors to the south. We're adding sand into the system with each one of these improvements. We are a public entity. We are afforded greater latitude than a private party. This entire project is about creating greater public access. It's also about addressing long-term climate change and the witnessed high and low water levels. We can't build an improvement that is for today. We have to build for tomorrow and for future generations. This is a 100-year or a 500-year project. Last time we met, people referenced Highland Park, Rosewood Beach. I was at the grand opening of Rosewood. It was lovely, beautiful, lovely three-cell system with stone and steel groins, mostly stone. Unfortunately, the coastal engineering was not quite calculated up to snuff. They didn't build the revetments high enough. When the high water came, the sand got washed out. The T that comes back didn't come back far enough, and the water got behind it, washed it out. They had emergency repairs. You can go online and witness that. And I don't know, it's upwards of $1 million of additional improvements. What we do, we have to do right the first time, and we have to accommodate future shifts in lake level. So again, this representation here is relative height of Lloyd to what's proposed as the player pocket and the sand elevation. You'll be able to see it better when we go to Lloyd.
We can't do anything down here unless we have
You can't hear when you're talking that way. You can't hear you over here.
So I would just say we can't do anything down here or at Elder unless we add sand.
Part of the project will require us to backfill the sand.
The regular Army Corps, IDNR requires that we add a certain amount of sand.
I'll answer that quick. One of the exhibits that is being shared this evening is the IDNR guidelines, but actually the Coastal Management Program from 2011. It's a couple hundred pages, but it'll be Thursday. Maybe on Thursday, we're going to be presenting that Coastal Management Program from 2011. You'll also see the 2015 guidelines. That's what guides any proposed improvements. There are guidelines that have to be followed, and I think Randy correctly or Colleen, section 3704. Is that right, Colleen?
I'm sorry, it's hard to hear.
Section 3704.
That is the section,
that's the
correct?
relevant section of the Illinois statutes.
Well, yes, that is correct.
So anything that we do here is reviewed and approved, and because we've withdrawn the permit application, anything that we propose will start over. So we will start afresh with another application, and everybody will have that 30-day public review period. So the purpose of tonight is to familiarize you. We're going to go to Lloyd, we're going to see the finished product in Lloyd, and we're going to go to Hubbard Woods, and we're going to have a more formal presentation and better acoustics and better recording. Yes, ma'am. was if they had any pushback from the residents at Lloyd regarding the height. I'm not aware of any pushback, but when we go to Lloyd, I would invite you to go onto the other side so that you understand the context, the scale, because the water is probably about 580 today. Might be a little bit higher than that. It fluctuates. As I said, at the top of Lloyd was surveyed at 591. So that's 11 feet of stone from the water to the top, and that's what we're trying to illustrate. Katie.
Can you bring that out for me, Nancy and Mary? I want everyone to know that this precedent, when you said when we go to permit, we have a choice.
Who are you? What's your name?
Katie Stevens. I live down the road, about 5 doors that way, 1 in.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. Mary and Nancy are coming. The planter boxes are 100 feet out. I thought they're 285 feet out. The planter boxes are going more than I thought, which is more than 125 feet, which is only what ISPI is allowed.
Katie, I have to correct you.
Okay.
We are here, look, people, we are here tonight for a workshop session. Katie, I appreciate the exhibit, but the facts have to be accurate.
Okay.
We have not proposed anything. The permit has been withdrawn.
Okay, I just want to show you.
If you're referring to the exhibit for demonstration purposes only.
Okay, demonstration is
Demonstration
the
purposes only.
plants in the planter. Warren says we're only going to put dune grass, but Mr. Ispia has a proposal that has a 50-foot horn beam on the beach. The planter boxes go 8 or 10 feet wide, 60 feet that way, and way out. This is the shortest plant that he will have. Now, see the view you're missing? You guys,
Wait, this is the shortest?
yes.
Soccer?
No. So what's going to happen is if you plant this, wait, I get 3 minutes.
Where's 100 feet? This is 20. That's 30.
That's 45 to the end.
Okay, where's 100?
45 to there. Double that, you get to 90. Here to there.
Okay, but I just want to know where 100 was.
We'll be able to. It's very useful to do this at Lloyd because there we have sand that projects out. The sand is at a much higher elevation.
So can I just say, if we do this, and we do planters, and we do seagrass, he will put a planter box on his property, and his plan is Rosa rugosa, juniper kettlari that are 10 to 20 feet tall, and 50-foot hornbeam at the beach. We will not see 90 feet anything. You won't have a view here.
What Katie is referencing is the plan,
I can't even hold it.
the alternate plan that was proposed by Mr. Ispia. That plan was submitted on Friday, the 15th.
On the sand.
Okay? So that plan was submitted on Friday the 15th. It details what he is asking for. That's not what we're here to discuss. Keep in mind that Mr. Ispia's representative may present their own plan. He has rights just as our neighbors to the north and south.
He says if he doesn't get what he wants, he's going to walk.
That's his prerogative.
Can you find
The
it?
view.
That's
Take
his
a look at the view.
Katie, can we take this down?
Yeah.
My deltoids.
Well, I'll just hold it.
My deltoids were getting a
I'll
little
just
raw.
hold it here.
I want to clarify. Excuse me. I want to clarify. We are not presenting Mr. Ispia's plan. Katie Stevens, a private resident, is attempting to present Mr. Ispia's plan.
Because if we do our plan, he'll do a much bigger plan on that property. He will have approval from the IDNR, and we will have set a precedent in this town.
Please
and this
bear in
village.
mind. Please bear in mind.
Thank you.
This is not supposed to be a shout match. Sure.
A bit louder?
Okay, you tell
Then
me.
there'd no beach access.
How tall the vegetation is when it's planted. I'm a gardener. Plants don't stay the same height.
The comment is the plans show the height of the plants when planted. These are not our plans. We are not presenting any plans for plants.
I'm just saying that
Presenting plans for plants, the more I have planter boxes.
Into the lake. Maintaining the lake.
Okay, we have a representative from Mr. Ispia.
David Williams, nice to see all of you on a beautiful night here. For those of you that were here on June 16th at the meeting, Mr. Ispia was there. He made it crystal clear that the plants in the planting pockets would extend up 10 feet high. That's what the minutes say.
All the way to the bluff. All the way to the bluff, because I saw a 50-foot horn maiden, similar to an elm tree.
Let me, if I may, because before this devolves, I'd like to offer 5 guiding principles that we're trying to proceed with. Number 1, what we're proposing is consistent with the Lakefront Master Plan as adopted in 2016. Okay? Number 2, we are proceeding with these guidelines. This is a workshop session. We are for discussion purposes only. Remember, this is a do-over, folks. We are operating on the premise that anything we permit, we will be the sole permittee on Park District-owned property. Okay? Everybody that wants to make an improvement lakeward of the ordinary high water line must get the consent of the IDNR and the Army Corps through a formal permit process, including a public comment period. So anything that comes out of these discussions will go back through that process and have a 30-day public comment period. Hey, nobody ever said the deal was done. No, that information is wrong. Vicky, that information is wrong. It's wrong. I will explain if you give me the opportunity. What is being discussed is the Army Corps of Engineers made a determination that their responsibility was from high water level down. Improvements made to the lake bed. The louvers and the planter pockets are above 581.5. Thus, the Army Corps said this is not our issue. This is an IDNR issue. The IDNR never gave any indication. They said very clearly that this is subject to public comment, and that's where it stands. So the Army Corps said it's above the high water level, not their jurisdiction, it's IDNR. That's why we're providing with the IDNR guidelines and that coastal management program published by the IDNR, so you can understand what the rules and regulations are that they're operating under.
Right, so this is a 10-foot pole, and I only showed it to here. I should have shown it all the way to the bottom.
So to clarify, Orchard 2020 representative, just I want to make sure that we're being clear here. You said that Mr. Ispia said on the 16th that he would plant nothing in the planter box taller than 10 feet. Plant?
First of all, it's not his right.
That's right.
It's the Park District's right. This is the Park District's land. The Park District will plant the plantings, and they'll maintain both, the sand management part of it, the planting part of it.
So the side agreement is off the table now? Is that correct?
Off the table.
So we
What
pay
side
for all
agreement?
these
What
things.
side agreement?
No agreement. There's only one written agreement.
What about all the confidential side agreements that they wouldn't waive the confidentiality?
All right, so I'll do this twice. I'm going to save this, but understand that negotiations, there were extra contractual demands that were foisted upon the Park District. Negotiations broke down more than a year ago. We engaged outside counsel. We went to the brink of litigation. We presented a 10-day notice, a draft 10-day notice to Mr. Ispia and to his counsel. He countered with a draft termination agreement. We went to an imposed deadline and we said no deals. All deals were off. We have continued to negotiate. At that time, what you may be referring to is a letter that I wrote to Mr. Ispia. Said, if good fences make good neighbors, in this case, it comes with the consent of the IDNR and the Army Corps. And don't forget, there's a 30-day public comment period. We knew this day was going to come, that the public would have the opportunity to comment on this, and that's where we are. And that's why this deal didn't go forward. All of that you see in the FOIA request, that was all negotiations that were behind the scenes because we were on the brink of litigation, and we, the Park District, we decided amongst the 7 of us that litigating with a billionaire would be an unwise use of public funds.
What was the reason?
Yeah, why? If you have legal standing,
$600,000 that was spent in the
All
last
of the
2 years,
coastal engineering
giving into
design.
all his demands, that money could have been used for the lawsuit. So you can have our properties back. You're giving away our best side of Centennial, the best part of the beach, to someone and giving us the crappy old houses going down the bluff that's under.
And who's paying for it?
Vicky, we haven't given any property away, I'm sorry.
Sorry, you're talking about
Yeah,
swapping.
but there was no giveaway. It was a swap.
David, turn around. No, go ahead, turn around.
Listen,
Is this on the border
I
of where you're gonna put
voted
it?
to withdraw the
No.
permit. So
No, the
please.
point is,
But we
you have
didn't give
50
anything
feet of
away.
parkland.
If you think it's a good idea to engage in a lawsuit with a well-resourced,
if you have the case law to support you, yes.
David,
You don't
behind
back off
you is
just because
50 feet
he's a
of
billionaire.
parkland. You're stranding with this plan right now.
And then the
Why are
tenant-
you stranding 50 feet? Right behind you. That's where it's going right now. You see the groin?
Alright, so
That's where it is now.
What John Root is saying is that we're stranding 50 feet of parkland. So if you go to Lloyd, and if you look at the plan for Centennial, you'll see that the center line of the groin is on our property. Why? Because when you get out into the lake, the stone does this. It's a trapezoid, and it expands out. So the toe of slope of the stone is on our side of the property, which is about 35, 40 feet when you get out into the lake. That's why Centennial was shifted this way. What Mr. Ischia did in the prior plan was allow us to put that line of steel just inside the property line and allow the toe of slope of the stone to extend onto his property. Thus, what we would have been stranding on the old plan was virtually nothing, because it was right on the property line. If we moved this over,
What do you mean being electric in steel walls?
we were cooperating.
Lauren, maybe talk a little bit about ADA access and
We know that. That's fine.
So look, let's not lose all our time. It is now 5:38. We'll go to Lloyd, and what you'll see at Lloyd is that stone. I would invite everyone to make the trip up and over. Be careful on those stone steps, but go to the other side. That's still Park District property on the other side.
So some
And
people
you'll
might
be
not
able to look at Lakefront and look up at the wall of stone. That's what we were responding to. That wall of stone, we're trying to lower it. As to the plans in the planter pocket, it could be sand. It could be nothing. Nothing. At this point, nothing's been decided. No.
How much does it cost?
Time up. Please do.
Can I say one thing? I've lived in Winnetka for 49 years, and the thing that is very disturbing to me is the constant reference to Lloyd. Lloyd Park has always been, as far as I can remember, and my children who are now in their 50s were part of the sailing program, a sailing beach. This has not had that, and by your own admission, we have Tower Road that has been a wonderful family beach, and by your admission, has the point that keeps the sand. So I would be very careful thinking that Lloyd Park, because it has been effective, is the answer for here. Rebecca Dawson. Building a privacy wall because that was what Mr. Ischia wanted.
All is gone.
You just renamed it. You called it by a different name. It's still a wall.
Folks, there are no, we prepared a plan that is for discussion purposes only.
Why?
So that we can get your input.
Everybody said they don't want anything. Why was all this?
1,900 people have said it.
Question asked is what's the total cost of the project? current estimate of the project is $10 million.
How much are the planter boxes? 50? Drive it home. How much is the planter boxes? Who's paying for it? We are. So are we paying for the planter
Coastal
boxes?
engineering. All right, question from Matt Roberts. Matt.
Who controls the planting in the planter box?
Winnetka Park District controls the plants in the planter box.
But then he
Not
gets
Mr.
his.
Ishbia.
Then he gets
And then
his
we
plants.
still own this quote-unquote stranded land?
I would say again, Matt?
Then we still quote own the stranded land?
Yes,
So it can't back up to the planter box. We own that.
correct.
But the planter box goes like this, 60 feet that way.
What
about on each
box
side?
doesn't exist. Only in the conceptual plan are we showing for reference purposes what could be. Remember, when you go to Lloyd, you'll see this massive quantity of stone. We're responding to it. It could be a line of steel, it could be stone, it could be sand, it could be stone on either side. We are in taking control. What I just said is we are responsive to the Lakefront master plan as adopted in 2016. We're doing it entirely on our property, and we are providing to Mr. Ishbia and to our neighbors to the north only the same basket of rights that any other riparian owner has. Now do keep that in mind, that we, as a permit applicant, seek the consent or the acknowledgement of our neighbors, just as Mr. Ishbia would have to do to us. For whatever he proposes, he will have to submit a permit application, notice gets given to the adjacent property owner, and there's a public comment period. So be respectful that we all have riparian rights. Us as the park district, we have a greater basket of rights because our purpose is to provide public access. That's what this project is about, providing public access.
Will there be steps like there are at Lloyd?
I'm sorry, there was
This location is what it will look like. Go from this piece to that piece.
So as envisioned, sand elevation at 587. Pretend that we're standing at 587, and if the top of the planter pocket is at 589, you're going up 2 feet. And then you're going down the other side, and you will be able to see that very clearly and understand at Lloyd that you're going, at Lloyd, you're going up 4 feet because it's 2 feet higher, and then you go down 11 to the water level.
Will there be steps? Will there be steps? Will there be steps here?
Will there be steps? The IDNR guidelines say, where possible,
No. Will there be steps?
I'm telling you what
That's
the
the question.
IDNR guidelines say. Guidelines say, where possible, provide passage up and over a perpendicular improvement on the landward side. That's what the current exhibit that was distributed as part of this package, that's what this exhibit shows. It shows steps on the landward side to get up and over the perpendicular improvement.
How about now this is
If these were to fall apart with Mr. Ishbia, is there a plan in the work for like an alternative plan?
Yeah, the question is, if these fall apart with Mr. Ishbia, is there a plan in the works? Yes, the 2016 master plan shows the divided park. It gives guidance to the improvement to the on the Howard Park. The exhibit that we're sharing with you this evening, in fact, contemplates that we don't have 261. We contemplate the north and south going consistent with the Lakefront master plan and steps up and over.
So you can do your sand filter. You can do your sand filter.
This man will they're off the table. They would never agree to it. What is the purpose? I wouldn't have asked for the second What's the purpose? We're responding to the massive quantity of stone and trying to save money. What's the difference between that and doing Lloyd here? We'll be able to come to that call on the 21st. I'll have that information.
You know, we've been doing this for 7 weeks. You've got to know the cost of the steel, believe me.
I don't
About,
want to say
and
because
who's
it's such a
paying
fluctuation.
for
I
it?
will have that on the 21st. I will suggest that the elevation in stone compared to the green line, you can see here how much stone is reduced in size. And the amount of stone that's required, as Warren suggested, with that trapezoid design, that footprint of stone is repeated for 100 feet by pounding in 2 rows of steel at a much cheaper price to backfill in for material.
They won't tell us what it costs in 7 weeks. 7 weeks.
Please let me answer the question. In 2020, before inflation, the cost of sheet pile was around $2,000 per lineal foot. The cost of sheet pile today varies between $3,000 and $4,200, depending upon how long it is and who's pounding it in. But that price is volatile based upon steel and based upon the labor cost. At the same time, diesel has gone up tremendously. And so you spend a lot of diesel trucking in stone from Madison. So that's why we don't have current costs, because we're trying to get current costs, but it's a constant moving target.
So what's the rush for it? The 2030 plan has got 8 more years on it. Why do you have to do it today? What's the rush?
Vicki, I know you have to correct this one. People are forgetting 3 years ago what this peak looked like. That is
But it's
why
not like that. The water's
we have an obligation to put a plan forth. I believe, as I said in previous meetings, it would be a failing of our duty not to put something forth for the community to obviously contemplate and opine on. Obviously, the community said no. We've withdrawn the permit, but we can't be so short-sighted because the beach looks beautiful tonight. And Elder actually has sand. There's a beach again. But I remember Ian Larkin saying it's not called Elder Beach because there's no beach. The water level could go back up. We don't know.
Yeah, but
It's not likely.
Hold on.
time with this.
Hold on. So we don't know. We don't know if a storm comes up.
But you think planter pockets are going to keep the better than stone?
I do believe that planter pockets are much more aesthetically
Have you
pleasing.
seen the ice in the
Oh my
winter
God,
that comes
into the
all
lake
up to the
plants?
bluffs? You think the trees can survive being covered with ice for the
We're
entire
gonna get a
winter?
kayak out for 5 feet.
You asked me my opinion.
David,
I believe that planter pockets are more aesthetic than rock. I do. And they're lower.
No, they're not. They're 50
You know what? We don't know. You won't tell us what the cost is. So how do we know how much cheaper it is? Because in 30 years, it's worth it. It's worth it to do those stuff.
I want to be deferential and give everyone an opportunity to talk.
Let's
Please.
just raise our hands. Thanks for the meeting. It's very useful to be on site. I will speak for people 5 feet and less. You cannot see over the rocks at water level now. I can't see south of those rocks. So for all children, most of whom are smaller than me still, nobody has a view. So I think those rock walls are too high. Now, the second question on here is everybody's worried about high water levels. The lake is in a cycle. We're still 9 feet above the average lake level. We're 41 feet above the low level. What is this whole project going to look like when the water is at its low water mark?
He moves out, get more beach.
You have to
Let me
use
correct.
wall
Let me say
here.
this. So everyone can hear. The comment was regarding what is this going to look like at a low lake level
14
versus
feet.
a high lake level. I want to reiterate that the range of Lake Michigan is about 6 feet. Over the last 120 years, we've tracked a low just below 576 and just above 582. So there's your 6-foot differential. It seasonally fluctuates a foot, 2 feet. In the winter, like January, the water's down and it comes back up. The high is typically July and August. So what you see today is about 580, the water level. It may vary from day to day, but we have to design a plan that accommodates both seasonal and long-term fluctuations. These steel jetties, they were the standard of care to arrest the littoral drift of sand for decades. And what people observe is the buildup of sand on one side, they get washed out in another storm. I already explained the littoral drift and that we live in a sand-starved environment. The more current design of incorporating these stone groins that extend out into the lake is twofold. The first is to capture the sand and stop that littoral drift. The second is to dissipate wave energy further out into the lake. So if you go to Lloyd on the waviest days, you'll see that wave energy doesn't make it to the bluff. It used to make it to the bluff. That's why we have those 100-year-old trees. We would not have Centennial Park but for this seawall. We wouldn't have Lloyd but for the Elder but for the gabion baskets and the seawall and the concrete. That would have been eroded into the lake without the fortification. What we are charged with doing, what 8 years ago the Lakefront Advisory Committee embarked upon, was to develop a plan for all our beaches to provide the greatest public access and a variety of uses on the beach. Back in August of 21, we heard from the dog beach users, and we responded. In the Lakefront Master Plan, it called for, in the event we could combine the beaches, we should activate this. Swimming here, non-motorized there, find another home for the dog beach. We formed a dog beach committee. We also allowed or provided for seasonal utilization. There was a very good, very thoughtful discussion. Hey, people aren't swimming September to May. Why not let the dogs run? Sure, we can let the dogs run from September to May, but we have to have a fence to keep the dogs on the beach, on the public side of the property. We also, the dog beach has now developed plans to take a portion of Tower Beach, which is owned by the village, and introduce a dog beach up there. So we would have dog beach north and a seasonal dog beach south.
John, I've got a question for you here, Costa. You've taken the T out of the plan that we have here, and Warren actually mentioned that Rosewood Beach eroded because the T wasn't big enough. So if you take that T out, is all the sand that we're going to be putting in here just going to wash out?
The initial design of the conceptual workshop draft that we put together here was vetted through Beacon Associates, and both systems are going to work independent of each other. We're keeping in the center steel that if you look to the north right now, you can see that's going to help hold the sand on the far Elder Beach property, and the Centennial design, because of the way it is on the south side of the arm, will in turn hold its own sand by design. So these are designed to be independent with the ability to combine these in the future if we're able to move forward with other plans, but these have also been designed to be or separate from one another if need be, and that has been reviewed. I'd like to make one other comment. There was a request over here from a lady who wanted me to make a point to say the elevation of the steel behind us is at 589, which again is the same elevation of the first 20 feet of the planter pocket. So the existing steel is at 589. Once again, the first 20 feet of the planting pocket was requested to be set
Could you put a rope that goes out as far as it's going to go?
I unfortunately cannot do that because of lake conditions. It would not last. That's the reason we pushed as far as we could and felt comfortable without.
I'll hold it with a kayak if you tell me.
Costa, when the lake conditions are calm, could you please go put something out there?
A buoy? Can you plant a buoy so we can visualize?
Well, the height is the issue, because that's 580. And this is
West noted. Randy was next. Randy?
Yeah, seeing as you brought up the dog beach, the only reason is, first of all, you tried to seek the elimination of dog beach. There's never any provision for a dog beach anywhere on this lakefront until we raised hell about it last summer. Secondly, why in hell do we need some non-motorized boat launch here when you spent $5 million up there and you're kicking the dog cage up to a crappy location off Town Road? It's not even a park district property. Thank you, Donna.
I can't hear you.
She and her children use this beach a lot.
My children were here and they climbed thermal cleaners boxes that sent them up in the room. They fell on the other side, but I gave them or just over them or with a lifeguard.
In the event, so Stephanie's question was, what if somebody climbs in the planter pocket and steps off the backside? What we've done as part of our homework is we've documented the 16 private properties to the south and the 42 private properties to the north of these two beaches. and we've documented the many trip and fall hazards, the impassable conditions. Just look to the north right there and you'll see a steel groin that lets out. You're either getting wet or you're climbing over. There are many of these conditions. We went to the Army Corps and the IDNR and said, if we're going to create this condition, we need fall protection. What form that fall protection takes is to be determined, but if there's a grade change of greater than 30 inches, we would certainly be advocating for fall protection. Steps up and over are recommended where possible. I do want to point out, now that we're here, I want to point out two things. If you look to the south, there are impassable conditions just beyond the Ishbia property.
Look while you can.
That's because of the lake.
There are impassable conditions. If you go to the north, about 550 feet north of Elder, you come to the Willow Road storm discharge. And please note that the village of Winnetka has recently gated and closed that access, citing unsafe conditions on the beach. Those same unsafe conditions that we noted with the rubble mound and the stormwater discharge.
Well, I think it's wonderful.
Totally understood. So the comment is there's still a sight line. Yes, indeed. We recognize that. We have acknowledged that what is being proposed in the way of a planter pocket could interrupt the sight lines. And if you read the guidelines, it talks about not blocking views. So we are sensitive to that, and thus we showed nothing in the current design that is subject to this community input. Okay? So, yeah, we should head north, but one more.
I just want to follow up on the financial aspects. Is there fixed price financing that is available for this project now on which the fixed price will expire at some point? People are wondering about
You
the
say
timing.
financing or fixed price
We've
cost?
discussed this.
Financing, obviously you talked about cost.
We've discussed this 3 times now in meetings. There is bond money left over. We raised money when the tenure was at 22 basis points in July of 2020. We have 3 years to spend 85% of that money. We also have 2 facilities with Winnetka that expire December 2022. We locked those in, and the tenure was at about 140.
Right, so we have financing expiring the end of this year and the end of 23, you said on the bond?
We have some flexibility regarding the Winnetka facilities expire at the end.
But we were talking about variable costs, and we have fixed pricing if we move now. I just wanted to address the move now versus move later
Can that
on
might
the
only
issue.
be used for this project, for other parts of the project?
This is the priority.
There's no other
You're not answering her question.
No, she's asking about the pockets
What
versus
about
the
the
project.
What about the golf course? Ask for permission to use it for other
So they gave you a specific uses only to be used with this particular road. So the park doesn't use it for anything else, it doesn't have to be used for this project. But did they put stipulations it has to be used for this? No. Did they give stipulations that they asked them if it's being used?
Yes, yes. You would never take public bond money, that's the junk bond money, and use it for purpose other than use a dump site. You would always ask the question. You would always identify how you expect to use it if it is all in the plan.
But the remaining proceeds from the 2020 bond deal, which depending upon, I figure I'll call it $5.5 million. That has a relatively broad use in the document.
Correct. But I just want to say, this is the most compelling project.
I believe that the board had previously decided that the priority, the most unique asset we have, we don't call it the North Park, the North Golf, we call it the North Shore. This is the asset that provides the most value to all of us here, whether you live on the lake or you're a mile and a half from the lake.
But you could do the original plan with that money without the planter pockets and all the other stuff that came up when you got it.
We could do half of it now. Based on cost.
That'd be great.
Based on cost increases, we think, and based on other
So
things.
Costa will show us all those numbers on the 21st, how much it will cost without the financing, how much it will cost with the
And
financing.
you're gonna get costs.
Costa's not addressing financing expenses.
That's
It's
part of
addressing
it.
construction costs.
We're taxpayers.
But you're saying, because it's not this money by a certain
By the deadline. We have to go back and make that money down at current market. So we need to know how much that would cost. What are
Like they couldn't answer my question about the cost of the stone.
What are municipal markets? Did they tell me the increase the road taxes? I can't but the cost of all these products could go down too in the next 6 months.
I'm just wondering about grants. That you don't forget that you could go for grants. That's something in your pocket. The other thing that I was saying, I thought just about the beach, there's also property up at the top in the park. You want to remember that.
Could
we just ask a really quick question about
6 o'clock. 6 o'clock. We can head to Lloyd because there are people waiting in Lloyd, I understand as well. And that was our calendar.
It's super quick. If Mr. Ishbia hasn't agreed yet to a swap where he doesn't control the pockets and things, then why are we having this here? Because wouldn't it then be back there?
For 2 purposes. To identify what 70 feet looks like and also the relative height.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Let's go to Lloyd.
Maybe I'll kayak.
All right, to refresh your memory, some people, I see some new faces. I'm Warren James, I'm the president of the Winnetka Park District. Costa Catullus, director of parks. John Peterson, executive director. Christina Cotto, vice president of the Winnetka Park District and commissioner, fellow commissioner. So thank you for joining us at Lloyd, where you could see a completed project with the improvements of the rubble mound break wall, the center break wall, and the short stub. What differentiates Lloyd from Centennial and Elder is that we have the boat launch and we have the Tower Road Pier that extend much further out into the lake and provide protection from the big northeasters. What we don't have is protection from the southeast, and thus you've got the big groin. I'm going to turn it over to Costa to explain the height of the stone, the design, and the relationship of the proposed height of the steel and steel and stone at Elder and Centennial.
Correct. Warren, thank you. Once again, for everybody, my name is Costa Catullus. I'm the Director of Parks and Operations for the Winnetka Park District. There is a sign-in sheet going around, so if I can have everybody sign in for this meeting, and we'll do our best to answer as many questions as we can once we go through our little walkthrough here. So as Warren suggested, as we've discussed here, about an hour ago thereabouts, walking through the string line and better understanding the representation of that. As you can see here represented is the same design that was unfortunately shortened at Centennial because we couldn't reach out into the lake. Well, here we're able to reach as far as the stone will allow to represent that. So as you see at the first post here, there's an elevation of 589 representing your planter pocket height. That in turn is represented directly behind Warren as the stone elevation of what would be proposed in a similar design charrette. As we continue down, the first post is 20 feet set. It continues at that same elevation of 589, and then we have a 1 foot elevation drop for the planter pocket. That will stretch 30 feet. Then we'll see another 1 foot elevation drop. Then the planter pocket will continue for 50 feet, where it will terminate at 100 feet. At that point at 100 feet, we will transition from the planter pocket of steel to the stone, similar style to the rubber mound breakwater, and continue that out into the lake. And that is going to be the piece that's going to help break that kinetic energy of the lake and reduce that wave action, allowing the beach to be sustained and allowing the design of Centennial, as we're showing here, to be able to endure the levels of the lake. The one thing I will, and as we suggested before, we have put steps in up and over here to cross and go on to the other side of Park District property, which continues for approximately 30 feet on the other side. In doing so, we give everybody an opportunity. We'd love for you to go over there and take a look at the south side of the Lloyd breakwater here to get a better perspective of that elevation change from the north side of the structure compared to the south side of the structure. Here we're roughly at about an elevation of 587 of the grading, as we had proposed at Centennial with a yellow rope. And on the opposing side, we're probably about an elevation of about 583 or so, give or take, maybe 584 tapering out. so you can really see the differential of the two as you cross up and over. You get a better sense of what that looks like.
Can I interject for a
Go
second?
ahead, yes, please.
It's really hard to understand the spatial relations, 3 dimensions. And I think what people are reacting to are the absolute math. But if I'm standing at 587, 3 years ago, I would be 13 feet in the air, 7 feet of fill and 6 feet of me. We're standing on 7 feet of fill that's been added to this beach to bring it up. That's what happened when the high water came. It eroded all this out. We had 100-year-old trees along this bluff line. You see the corner of the house? Waves were breaking behind the corner of the house. It was eroding underneath that house. And these trees were collapsing into the lake. That would have happened at Elder and Centennial, but for the fortification that we had. We had no fortification here. The water came up, it got washed out. Now, the big waves come, they don't reach it. There's a relationship between the opening. You see the stone here and the stone there? There's a relationship between how wide that gap is and how far the waves will reach in. That's the advice we get from our coastal consultants. That was the importance and what didn't happen at Rosewood. That gap was much larger at Rosewood and it was much closer to the shore, so the wave action made it in. You'll notice here, we've got a small island of rock because of the protection from the northeast afforded by the power plant, pier, and the boat launch. We're not as concerned about those northeast waves washing out. At Rosewood, they had a tee. It wasn't that long. It wasn't that tall. The wave action came behind it and scoured out the sand. That was the importance of the tee. The current plan, for discussion purposes, shows the existing steel that remains in place to arrest that, stop that littoral drift. But this is what? How far? 250 feet? 225. This is 225 feet out to the center line of where it turns. So if you can imagine, halfway out that 100 feet, we transition from the steel to the stone, and that's where all these massive boulders are very useful to dissipate the wave energy. But back here, where we just aren't going to, the waves aren't going to reach here, we looked at this and said, this is wasteful, it's expensive, and candidly, it's not very pretty, and it's not very natural. So that was the evolution of the planter pockets, and if we could transition from foliage that we see transitioning down the bluff, and if it's native plantings such as dune grass and rugosa rose, which are naturally found in this environment, they're not going to obscure the view any more than another 2 feet of rock or 4 feet of rock in this instance from 591. We looked at this, said too much rock. Let's keep it down here. Let's keep, and this is 589. Then we go down to 588 and down to 587. So we're trying to provide more views than here at Lloyd, but keep in mind, Lake's at 580. Doesn't seem like it today, does it? Seems like it might be a little bit higher, but not much. You don't perceive that there's a 7-foot grade change from my feet to the water level over this distance. So why do we need the big rubble mounds? Dissipate wave energy. If we hold them too low, the waves break right over the top of them, and you get a situation like occurred at Rosewood, washout. So it's a fine balance as to how high. Some coastal engineers would say, not 587, go up to 589 or 591 if you want to be out that far. We struck the balance at 587 so that you can stand here and see the horizon. Question?
So this blue line is the same elevation as the blue line over at the other beach?
Yes.
Is the plan to backfill sand?
Yes.
As here, so that effectively you'll be at the same height sand-wise here
Yes.
relative to that
Yes, so this is 589. My feet are at 587. 589 is the top of the steel seawall at Centennial. But all that sand got scoured out in 2020 and before. So we're going to overfill it. We're going to fill it up to this level. And then because we have the protection, it won't get washed out. So your feet are much higher. You're going to have that panorama, and we're trying to transition in a naturalistic way from the beautiful bluff to the plantings and then out to enjoy the vista.
I have a question based on what you just said. You pointed out that you have rocks out there to break up waves, blah, blah, blah. Why is this necessary at all? Why have planter pockets at all?
What?
What's the purpose?
You need something to attach to the bluff line, right? We have the steel seawall. We have the steel seawall that's at 589, right?
What do you
if
mean
the
by
wave-
attached to the bluff line?
Because if you don't, if
You want to
get
keep
that-
those rocks from moving.
So we want to make sure that the water doesn't sweep through the system
The
and
water cuts
scour
through.
out all the sand that we would have placed or the beach itself.
Okay.
So the intent is to basically create a bookend, if you will,
Okay. So
for
why
the
not-
beach to be able to
Why
fill
not
that
just
in.
bring down? Why not get rid of the planters? Why not just bring the rocks down to the level of the beach?
That's an option. It's absolutely.
And then it would be
it's
a
absolutely
wide
an
open
option.
view.
So what we
We'd have to
presented.
I would suggest that we'd have to go through our coastal engineering to make sure that we can support that capacity, but that's something we can investigate.
That would keep the beach as it is, and not obstruct the views at all.
Other questions?
Warren, I'm trying to understand why the pockets can be so much lower than the rocks.
Because this design, we had a lot of rock, and we used up this rock here at 591. So here I am. I'm standing at 591, and my observation was we've got too much rock. Let's lower it. Let's provide more views. This is totally unnatural. This is quartz trucked in from Madison. Why spend the money to truck these giant boulders when we can do it with steel and sand less expensively, more naturalistically? Transition at 100 feet where we do need this massive rock, and the random placement of the rocks helps dissipate the wave energy. It doesn't reflect it. Everybody loves to come down here and see the waves crashing against the seawall and splashing up. That is incredibly damaging. That's why the village has a massive multi-hundreds of thousands of dollars improvement at the end of tower right now, because over the years that energy gets dissipated and it takes its toll. The rocks don't move. They don't care.
So I'm just trying to understand. Are you saying that we could have built it no higher than the green line,
We could have.
but we built it that high?
Yes, it
So-
got built that high.
Okay. So we got built that high. So
Yeah.
just observing them. You've asked us to come down here because this, you've told us, is what the view could be based on using rocks.
This. We would never go to 591 anymore. Never. Some coastal engineers might tell you you'll go higher. We landed at 587 out there, thinking that's a nice compromise between view and Chuck. Feel free to weigh in. You've got a lot of knowledge. You served in the Lakefront Advisory Committee.
But again, I'm just one of your beach users. I'm just understanding you to say that we could have built these rock walls a lot lower.
Yes.
That was a design. It was a design we selected then, but we could have, in hindsight, built them a lot lower.
Yes. So we took what we learned at Lloyd. We're going, I think we could come up with an aesthetically more pleasing approach. Lower the total profile and transition this bluff with landscaping. Now we're hearing objections to larger plant material. Well, we've got towering trees here, but I understand that the further out those towering trees come, the more views they eclipse. But I believe, aesthetically, there is an appropriate transition of landscape to rock. I see Mr. Shabika hiding in the background. Come on up here. I'm doing your job, John.
Why am I coming up?
Well, you showed up.
The other one was that we did this when the water levels were quite a bit higher, and the damage was substantial here. So that drove the decision. It was a small delta in cost, and we were nervous.
See the beach house over there? We held a meeting and then, yeah. Waves breaking against the beach house, splashing over the roof.
It'd be similar in design, right? You wouldn't suggest carrying it 587 all the way back, would you?
Well, here's the thing.
John Shabika and Associates.
Yeah, and sorry I can't yell. I have 2 broken ribs right now, which I'm really enjoying. The elevation of the back of the breakwater, you have to think of this like building a bucket. So if we take this profile of the beach and build it all the way up to this corner, similar to as you walk next door, you'll see that sand profile fill up to the corner of this. we're grading this beach relatively flat because that's how it's being used from this standpoint. And from a coastal engineering standpoint, this permit was submitted, as Warren talked about, right after we came off conditions that we never expected. That Halloween storm of October of 2014 changed coastal engineering for a record standpoint. So you can build a structure that's lower, understand that what it means is at high lake level, the system may just hold more beach, it might hold less beach, and may require more maintenance. And like Warren talked about, that's what Highland Park has learned at Rosewood. It was built and permitted at a time when the regulators thought we weren't going back to that high lake level record. And within 3 years, they're spending $300,000 in mitigational sand. So from the standpoint of this system, it really comes down to meetings like this of what are your expectations, not only for the size of the structure, but also what maintenance is going to be required. And what I love is when we were designing this beach, this wasn't supposed to be a swimming beach. So this was supposed to be a boat use only. So if this beach was half the size, in some ways that didn't matter because it wasn't affecting program. Elder and Centennial are a little different. The goal of that is for it to be a swimming beach. So we need bigger beach. And with that, again, you just engineer it or design it for the standpoint of understand that coastal engineering is not, and Chuck will know this, coastal engineering is not an exact science. What we look at is how do all of these systems function based on, again, that gap ratio for its system's ability to hold sand. And the nice thing, and Warren talked about it a little bit, the reason that this was rock is there's pipes underneath here that take our stormwater out into the lake. So at Elder Centennial, we're putting those pipes on the north side. We need that steel. On the south side, one of the nice things is with the cost of trucking right now, that steel is cheaper than it is to put a structure. And this structure is almost 60 feet wide at the base, if you think about it as a big triangle. So that allows us to be a little bit more cost effective with that area where we don't need to break wave energy.
So, I have a question.
Yeah.
You could build it with stone then.
100%. Yeah.
And then things wouldn't grow on it.
Correct.
There's nothing growing on it.
Yeah, the only time that we see the grasses grow is when they're aggressively managed by landscapers. If you walk down and see, there's other sites where you can't tell that there's stone revetments buried under there, but that's because of how the landscape is.
Hold on, just a question.
Yeah.
The stormwater pipe goes out through the breakwater, or is it further over there?
So
Stormwater pipe discharges through there, and there's overflow protection for the runoff capacity if that system gets overloaded by design, or not by design, but by size. So that's the reason the tech ponds are there to help with that overflow or residual erosion.
Okay.
That's why there's that block down at the
Two
bottom.
capacity for that.
So the answer was there's there's one stormwater pipe that's buried underneath there, and then there's the surface water that makes it past that, overflows, and that's why I had to put the stone on the bluff.
So then you could put the stormwater pipe at Elder under rock, as you didn't say.
Yeah. So the comment was we could put the stormwater pipe at Elder under the rock. Yes, we can. The south edge of that holds that access road. So we need that vertical profile because we got to get that truck turning movement down. And if we had to bring the slope of the stone, would compromise the integrity of that road. But on the other side,
Is there other ways?
I'm telling you, you're the civil engineer.
Well, I think there might be.
The way that we've identified it, Chuck, is to go through that, and we have the road being designed down, and then a single pour of concrete up against the north edge of the sheet piling to frame that, so we can get down in there. That's how it was identified. So
There are other ways of design.
there are, but that's what we work through with our engineers as one of the most cost-effective ways. So.
Another question.
In the proposed design, how far do the planters extend? Do they go from the shore all the way out?
Nope.
They transition at 100 feet, which this being foot one, there's a black rope that transitions from the green at 100 feet. So where Warren is going to stop walking will be 100 feet, which should be that next post that he's coming up to. From this point to that is 100 feet, and that's where the planting parking would start and stop. So the reason we chose here was because this was closest elevation to show.
So then what are you going to put in the planter and how high will that grow?
That has been undetermined at this point. There has been suggestions by third party, but nothing has been identified solely from the park district. That's where we're going back with these workshop settings, is to try to find that correct balance. Whether it's dune grasses, Rosa rugosa, that might be maintained at an elevation of this height, which once again you can clearly see over the top, compared to some of the other trees and so forth that has been proposed from third party. None of that has been decided at this point in time.
What about the possibility of not giving planter boxes at all? It seems to be the sentiment of most people attending this workshop is not having plantings, have a low, whatever you need, as low as possible to maintain as much of the view as possible. Is that on the table as a
Understood, yes. Yes. Yep. There's another question.
Prior to the negotiations for the land swap, was there ever any discussion at a board level or a staff level about planter pockets
No.
being incorporated in
Nope.
anything with relating to the beachfront at any of the beaches?
No, the planter pocket concept evolved after the exchange agreement was signed. It came about initially as a request for a large long wall extending out into the lake, which was obviously not desirable.
But the original design in your original plan in 2016 or whatever incorporated a rock.
So the Lakefront master plan shows the concept of 2 stone groins and a center tee.
Correct.
That's what the Lakefront master plan shows. The original November of 2020 plan, we had 2 options. One that was all stone and one that had 100 feet of steel transitioning to stone.
But to clarify, it all came about because of your conversations and negotiations with the land purchaser.
Yes.
Okay.
Now on the other side, we did contemplate 2 rows of steel once we got into what kind of protection do we need for the storm sewer pipes. Elder is a much different storm sewer situation. So understand that the village has 3 massive storm sewers coming from a 54-inch diameter storm sewer coming down Elder, and a 30 and
I think a 36 maybe.
36 and a 30 coming down
Converging.
Sheridan. They all come into a junction and they get squeezed down into 2 pipes, one of which is 100 years old, made out of brick.
Brick and mortar, yeah. Basically 18 by 2 feet. And the other one's a 27-inch concrete pipe that then transitioned to 2 36-inch pipes and then converged down underneath the pier to one 54-inch corrugated pipe that runs the length of the pier at Elder. So that discharge is hidden underneath and protected by the existing pier.
That pier was built in 1947. Oh, the designs were approved in 1947. It's 75 years old. It's well beyond its useful life. And the idea is to replace that, and in so doing, incorporate stormwater, current stormwater design, so we can do a sediment trap, 2 different sediment traps, so we can collect the pollutants before they're discharged out into the lake.
What's the material that the planter boxes are supposed to be made out of?
So the old plan, which has been withdrawn, showed steel. The current design, I think it's still
One side is steel, yeah. So the current design that you'll see tonight, we had proposed the south edge being steel, and then we talked about using a material called Rosetta Stone as we selected here to hold back the bluff. It's a little bit more softer than the steel and be able to step it down in a more natural fashion, more inviting.
So steel, which is not a natural substance, you think is
I'm sorry, you got to speak up, I apologize.
I'm saying, so steel, which is not a natural substance, unlike rock, although maybe from Madison is natural, the proposal is to build that and then plant it and then maintain that. Plants just don't grow. You'll be maintaining that. So there's addition. It's not natural, and it's additional cost to maintain it. In addition to potentially, larger plants growing. So I'm just clarifying.
Yeah,
That's
so-
my understanding, right?
If I may, the dune grasses, as we have at Tower, are pretty much maintenance-free once they're established. And it will take a little bit to establish them, you are correct, but once they are established, they're pretty much hands-off. Other materials that would be put in there to be selected is still to be determined.
You have erosion, you have storms, you have the lake going up and down over the next 100 years. Like, you can't.
Right, and at the proposed elevations, and those being set far enough in with the lakewood protection of the stone, they're protected where we're by design. It was our hope that we wouldn't have those erosion control issues, those maintenance costs that go along with that, as you're suggesting. That was our forward thinking.
Wind and rain, and we all know
So here's an interesting observation. Because we're here, if you turn and look at the power plant, the shoreline, the original shoreline, followed the bluff to the corner of the power plant. You can see where it's kind of a clipped corner. And you can go back in time through aerial photographs in 1960, and this shoreline ran straight there. And once the Winnetka Park District built the boat launch, sand started to accumulate. And then the boat launch was extended with the L on the end, and sand continues. And now it continues to blow in. So we put the concrete blocks on the edge of our pier, and the sand continues to accumulate.
So the earth is going to maintain and grow, so you can't for sure know what's going to happen.
It would either have to be actively maintained or, as has occurred there, volunteer growth.
Right?
Volunteer growth.
The other question is, so initially, whether it be the stones here or the stones out there, you're planning to truck in to save money, right? Instead of using a barge, which I believe most of the
Yeah.
The cost delta, yes.
But so what about the wear and tear on the roads that nobody counts? And I mean, is it really cost effective? Because I got to tell you,
It's almost double in cost.
and once we have to replace Tower Road and Sheridan Road because of the wear and tear, like nobody's adding that all in. So I'm just.
We're only talking, I think, about stone from there to there. All the rest of that stone's got to be trucked in.
And I'm saying all the private residents along here have all barged it in. So I'm just.
Because I couldn't get the permits to bring it by in my truck.
If I can, sure. The ability for us is because we have a land-based operation where we can truck in. So the cost delta is probably about half, and plus the time delta is about half of what it would take for weather days that are good working days. So in the marine environment, and John, you could probably support me, that you get about half the working days, if not less, of marine-based versus land-based construction, correct?
About half.
Right. So our ability to construct this in a more timely manner and a better cost reduction. Are there ancillary costs for the roadway? We work with the village to identify the path of least resistance for the neighbor to make sure we're meeting all the all the requirements for the roadways. But there is wear and tear. I'm not going to argue there's not. But for the amount of trucks that we're driving in comparison, a lot of the residential, they don't have the ability to work land-based because they only have their landlocked.
Concrete trucks, the excavators with their dump trucks, those roads are designed to support it. Is there wear and tear? For
Take
sure.
the rocks over the park, so there was no way to get them to my house. Warren, I've forgotten how many of those rocks can go in the back of a truck.
Of the large Costa?
Yeah, so typically it's on tonnage. And usually it's 22.5 tons is what an average off-the-road semi can handle.
Or
so
3.
2 to 3 typically.
2 to 3 at a time. That's how heavy they are.
Lauren, these steps and the passage sign that you guys put here is so beautiful. Will this be at Centennial at Centennial Elder on both sides? Following the Illinois Public Trust Doctrine?
All right, you packed a lot into that comment there. The questions regarding the steps. So and then there was a mention of the Illinois Public Trust Doctrine. Well, the Public Trust Doctrine goes back, I don't know, 1,000 years?
It goes back to like 250 BC.
250 BC.
Give or take.
Okay. So it gets interpreted by states differently. And I'm glad you asked that question. You go to Michigan, you go to Wisconsin, they are far more protective of the public trust with respect to the public versus the private. Illinois has about 50 miles of shoreline in Lake Michigan. Due to the, thanks to Daniel Burnham, Chicago's got a lot of public lakefront. On the North Shore, we've got a lot of expensive homes with a lot of powerful people, and thus Illinois candidly has made a muddled mess of the public trust doctrine. I don't think a decision's been reached since 1973 that's been dispositive of the rights, but the guidelines that are referenced in the Coastal Management Program promulgated by the IDNR in 2011 say that in Illinois, the riparian rights end at the calm water's edge, which means you'd have to have your feet wet to be on public property. The riparian rights move with the water on a calm day, it goes out to the water's edge. Although there's this gray caveat, and you can Ted, you probably know as much about this, that suggests that if there is an artificial accretion of sand that is done by a private property owner, that's still public land.
Yeah.
An artificial accretion of sand is still public land. So we're talking about public land here, so we don't care because we are the public. So this is public land, and our project is all about creating public access. Now you go to the other side, and you have to decide, is that artificial, or is that naturally occurring sand? And then you can decide, does the private property end at the water's edge, or is it artificial accretion of sand? And so that's, I guess, why John's father, Charlie, said, please, somebody sue the IDNR so we can get a resolution. But for the past 50 years, nobody's taken it to court. It's common law. It's not statutory, so it's very vague. And that's why we continue to muddle around. But keep in mind, we are the public. We are allowed to create and fill with the consent of the IDNR and the Army Corps of Engineers, because our project at Elder and Centennial, it's all about public access. It's all about public access for people of all abilities. Look up there. Look at look at Lloyd. Towers even higher. You can't get an ADA accessible ramp from this tableland. That's up at what, 630? 640? That's very high. At Centennial, we have the beauty of Centennial is that the tableland is at 613 above sea level. So we only have 33 feet instead of 50 or 60 feet. So we have an ADA accessible route down to the boardwalk, and the boardwalk goes down to the beach, and the beach goes out into the T, so somebody in a wheelchair can park in Centennial and wheel all the way out and enjoy the panoramic vista, and you just can't do it in Winnetka right now. The best you can do is park at Tower or park down here and wheel out to the end.
My question is, you thought it was important to do it here. Will you do it at Centennial?
Okay, so the guidelines for the steps say where possible provide steps up and over. The conceptual plan that we provided for discussion has steps up and over.
Like this? Like this, Warren?
It's
Just
actually
like
a little more it's a little better organized.
I saw that.
This is pretty random, and this can get slippery, right? This could get slippery. If you look at the plan that we published as a part of the presentation documents, you'll see it. So yeah, you know what? It's 6:55.
That's as part of the draft document.
6:55. We'll be able to show you everything. Let's go to.
Since that sign is maintained by my tax dollars, and it is planted in the middle of public properties, why am I doing that? That, as people have commented, people have been reluctant to walk over the steps because they see that sign that incorrectly implies that public land ends there, and it doesn't. And as you pointed out, they've built a ribbon or whatever over there, so some of the sand on that beach is probably accreated, and so that's public land too. So I mean, I feel like these signs.
I said that's a much bigger discussion, and we could take that up. Somebody wants to.
I make one last point.
Yeah.
Orchard 2020 was really smart to hand this out to everybody before they came to this meeting. This is not our plan. This has no steps in it. This is Orchard 2020's plan that they want us to vote on July 21st because they've demanded it. There are no steps in the Orchard 2020 plan, not one. In our plan that Warren and the team have put together, we have steps, okay? So that's a very important thing to know. This is not the Park District plan that was handed out to each and every one of you, all right? Make sure everybody's aware of that.
Let's all meet at Hubbard Woods.
Sorry, it was Justin Team the first, 50-50 BC.
50-50 BC.
I'm sorry, 550 BC. So 300 years.
Okay, we have 7 commissioners. If you haven't already, please sign the white attendance sheet at the table at the entrance of the auditorium. If you signed in at Centennial and Lloyd, we would still like to report your attendance at this portion of the workshop. Zoom is the platform being used to video note that the chat feature will not be monitored. Public comment will only be accepted in person. The link to the video will be available next week. And if, when you are addressing the board, would please face the board, the camera over here. But some people are turning around. We just want to make sure you speak into the microphone so that your comments are captured. Would you address the board, please? Before we get started, I want to offer my special thanks to Libby, Molly, Costa, and Kyle. There's a lot of setup involved, coordinating 3 different venues. This is on top of their ordinary daily duties. So thank you for your continued efforts to help. I'd like to call forward the July 18, 2022 special board meeting, workshop format, 7:18 p.m. regarding the Lakefront Breakwater Design Workshop at Albert Woods. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Archambault.
Here.
Commissioner Cotto. Here. Commissioner James.
Here.
Commissioner Lawson.
Here.
Commissioner Rapp. Here. Commissioner Root. Francis. Commissioner Seaman.
Here. Okay. When called upon to speak, please step up to the podium and state your name for the record. All comments under 3 minutes. This is not a question and answer forum. Nobody will be answering questions tonight. So please do not expect a response or an answer from Park Board immediately. Of course, it's a workshop session, so we're going to try to. If you prefer to share your comments in writing, you may use comment cards, which are available near the sign-in sheets. Any Park District staff will accept the card and be shared with the board. This time, I'd like to turn it over for a presentation of the workshop draft of the Elder Lane and Centennial Beach Breakwater Design. This is a draft. It's for discussion purposes only. It's to elicit your comments and feedback, but we're trying to incorporate that which we've already heard. Costa, do you want to review that briefly again?
I will. I just want to confirm that item 3A are says remarks from visitors. Are we allowing that first?
Oh, sorry. My bad. Let's start with remarks from visitors. Then we'll do the presentation. And then we'll get more comments. My apologies. So, who would like to speak first?
I'm happy to go first.
Okay.
Decided
neighbor.
I was about to look up the agenda to see if that I could see it. But anyway, okay, so based on everything I've heard, stuff that I've seen, based on the fact that the property owner to the south of Centennial has now bought a 4th property on the lake and has stated that he doesn't really care anymore and he's going to move on. The Park District decides what they want to do because he has relatives that would be willing to live in that house that are between the parks. I think it's time for the Park District to say enough. I feel like this entire negotiation was not done in good faith by one of the parties. I think it was the Park District. I feel that at this point, that those parks have been separated for 100 years. Another 20 or 30 years of separation isn't going to hurt. The original land swap was going to be equivalent. Now the land swap was something like 0.5 versus 0.7, although I know there's nuance there. I just feel that at this point, it is clear that the property owner itself doesn't want to deal in a good faith. And we should just redevelop the 2 parks to the best of our ability with house between them. And if they want to live between them, that's fine. People apparently have, although not for the last 20 years, because I don't think they like living between the parks, but he says that's going to be fine. And so we should stop this. We should make any obstructions to the beach as fully possible. There shouldn't be planter pockets because those will only add height. They don't provide any stabilization effects. And just move on with it. So, I'm sorry, I know that there was a lot of work that went into this, but at this point, I feel that it's just not worth it any longer. And there was one more thing I want to say. I have to stop and think. I've been going ahead of myself. Yeah, I mean, I think, yeah. And, yes. And you know, we should maintain beach access to the south. We build our own little arrangement there and put steps over it. And we can have access to the South Beach. And if the property owner to the south feels that they need privacy, they are welcome to build a fence along their property line in parallel to the lake shore. They'll have all the privacy they want in their land, and the beach will still be accessible. The idea of building a fence or any sort of other blockage out onto the lake is important in my opinion. Thank you.
Lori Peters from 785 Lincoln. When I stood before you on May 26th to make my first public comment about this project, I said, this is about so much more than one beach. I had no idea how pathetic that comment would be. After weeks of disclosures, thanks to the persistent FOIA requests from concerned citizens, we all know just how much bigger this issue is. Our problem with walls and planter buckets is what just the tip of the iceberg. The critical issues now are transparency, good governance, and public trust, all of which have been violated during the past 2 years of secret negotiations. The big questions now are the following. How did public officials whom we elected to represent us, people of Winnetka, come to put the outrageous demands of a private landowner above the public interest? How did something built as a simple land swap lead to an unprecedented privacy features and an individual dictating what can be planted and what activities can occur on public parkland? And how could a park board influence our own friends and neighbors and mislead us about the real reasons for these walls and planter pockets? I understand that it was appealing to join the two parks at what seemed to be very little cost compared to buying one shared property. But when the true costs were revealed in the demands of Mr. Ishbia's master agreement, it should have been apparent that those costs were too high. And while I know it might be tempting to say we have spent so much and we keep going, I would say that pouring good money into bad is never a good idea. The absolute highest cost of this deal has been the loss of credibility. I don't know how you think you can sway me now with lines on the beach and we're drawing when the whole premise of the design was driven from the conception by private interest. I feel it's the biggest and best investment unit worth make now is to rebuild public trust. And start doing that by recognizing that this deal is not in the public interest, and that you're going to walk away from it and come up with a new citizen-driven plan to beaches that serves all the taxpayers of Winnetka. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Randy Whitchurch, 143 Fort Lane. Last month, this community emphatically rejected the proposed design for the breakwater system at Elvis. We objected to the louvered fence, the blockage of beach access north and south of Elvis Centennial, the destruction of the panoramic view of the lakefront, the violation of the Illinois Public Trust Doctrine, and the catering to the privacy interests of Justin Ishbia over the interests of this community. We requested a rethink of this design with the participation of a citizens advisory board to ensure that the community's interests took priority over Mr. Ishbia's desire for a private beach and public land. Your design rethink is deeply flawed. It's only a simple modification of a rejected plan that still prioritizes privacy interests of a billionaire over the interests of the community. You need to answer a few questions. One, the argument that the planter boxes don't block the view is misleading and disingenuous. We neglected to mention 20 to 30 foot high trees that Mr. Ishbia plans to put into them. These will clearly block the panoramic view of the lake, but they will provide lots of privacy to Mr. Ishbia. Two, how do we cross the breakwater? Mr. Ishbia doesn't want anyone to cross. He still thinks he owns a private beach, and he's determined to block public access. You caved into Mr. Ishbia's privacy desires, but this design is contrary to the Illinois Public Trust Doctrine and sets a dangerous precedent for other properties along the shoreline. Why did you ignore our request for Citizens Advisory Board on the redesign? Why does the project cost $10 to $13 million when Lloyd only costs $5.1 million? The breakwater designs are virtually identical. What else is included in this budget? Who pays for what? And how much of our tax dollars directly benefit Mr. Ishbia? What future cost obligations, maintenance requirements,
requirements and usage restrictions as the park district promises. More fundamentally, why should Winnetka taxpayers subsidize a billionaire's desire for a private beach on public land? In 1965, the Park District leveraged the power of eminent domain to gain control of the property that is now Centennial Park. We still have that power. Why not use it to gain control of 261 Sheridan, unite the parks, and keep all of Centennial Park for the enjoyment of future generations? The core problem here is that the property swap agreement is a bad deal for Winnetka. You have let your desire to acquire 261 Sheridan override your judgment and cede too much power to a non-resident billionaire. Mr. Ishbia is protecting his interests, not ours. That's your job. And now he's threatening to walk away from the deal unless he gets his way. Let him walk. John Reed, 326. Libby, you have my slides? Okay, we go ahead and put this up.
Are we doing presentations from, this is just for 3 minutes? Or do 3 minutes after?
What, you have another section?
There's, after the Park District presentation, there's an opportunity to re-present. I thought that's one of the ones I apologize. Thank you, guys. Can you do that?
Yeah. Very good. Yeah, we'll do a presentation.
Again. Mary Garrison, 350 Ridge. Good evening, and thank you for the tour. It's a little tough walking through the sand, but it's great to be down there. Working on the combined parks in question seemed reasonable when the 2030 plan was conceived. It seems that the whole situation of the swap with the property owner on the south end of Centennial has gotten out of control with many extraneous demands. Maybe some of those have been taken care of. I have read and reread the history of our wonderful parks. They serve our community, but something for everyone. Winnetka Park District does not need to get in situations that cause the board and the citizens that you represent all the grief of the past couple of years. You have volunteered your precious time for us, and we thank you. Yesterday, my granddaughter and I went to Centennial. This project has even sparked the interest of the teen group, the ones who usually only think of themselves. 4 seniors were sitting on one bench, overlooking the water above the gate to the beach. One was wearing a cap, showing that he was a veteran of the Korean War. One was on a walk. We enjoyed a conversation with them, and they stated that this was the perfect park and the perfect day to enjoy the lake views. Centennial Park, in its present state, reaches many of our citizens. The teens, the animal lovers, the seniors, and the baby strollers. The views of the lake are breathtaking, and I wonder why we are trying to reinvent the wheel. In 1968, I'll change the date a little bit from the existing hospital on the Centennial property was available for sale. And a prominent builder, Mr. Hemphill, who has built many Winnetka's finest homes, bought the property for development. A citizen group wanted open space to add another park and beach area for the public. A referendum sought money, and above the determination of the purchaser, the citizens of Winnetka have what is Centennial today. Read the history. The referendum passed by 119 votes, giving the Park District $550,000 to buy out Hemphill and create a park. Initially, Hemphill made comments to the press that he would have no more discussions with the Park District jury trial. However, the two parties were able to work out an agreement in the end. Here we are almost 50 years later, and we must marvel at the speed with which these events unfolded. North Shore Hospital announced the sale to Hemphill on October 6, 1968. By October 30th, the Winnetka Conservation Association had organized and collected signatures. Hemphill took title to the property on November 1st, and on November 7th, the Park District filed the condemnation suit, and the village held a referendum vote on December 7th. Negotiations with Hemphill concluded by the end of December. It was less than 3 months from an idea of a new park, despite many obstacles. The new park was dedicated in 1969, the 100-year anniversary of Winnetka's incorporation of the village, hence the name Centennial Park. We need not change and have our parks be different than they are now, but we need to maintain the bluffs and the parkland. We need not set a precedent with planter boxes. Can you imagine the shoreline 50 years from now if the Winnetka Park District set a precedent, the like of the planter boxes that are being imposed? We need not take away the riparian rights. We need not have constant requests for more from one or two practices. The Winnetka Park District has always worked with the reasonable people in this community. We need to adhere to the American with Disabilities Act that's been widely the park funds. Mr. Hemphill was upset with the citizens in 1968, but Winnetka Park District is what it is today because of those who care. We need to be thankful for our forefathers who had the courage to spend the time to make our community what it is today. You, as commissioners representing the citizens of Winnetka, we ask for your foresight to maintain Centennial and Elder as we know these parks today. In the last 25 years, the 261 property has come up for sale twice. As far as the 2030 plan, other than an outright purchase, this land can be acquired. Again, the citizens of Winnetka, thank you for your volunteerism. The park board's a great board to be on to represent our community. Your job can be thankless, but it's also very rewarding. So thank you for your time and all your volunteers.
Vicky Atherton, 730 Arctic Road, Winnetka. I was plunging on the beach today. I loved seeing the shoreline and the beautiful blue sky. And the one thing we really missed was we didn't go up to Centennial Park and look at how much would be changed with that park if we actually allow this walk to go through. So I'm hoping that you'll have another workshop at the Centennial Park and actually look at the parks too. Those are a huge part of this project. And the open space, the green space that, as Mary said, all those residents worked so hard to acquire. I'm sure they're all rolling over in their graves right now, thinking that they did all that work to save that space, and now we're just going to give it back to a private homeowner. That doesn't seem right. I was thinking about all the walls that have been put up along Sheridan Road with the acquisition of all the big properties. And next time you go by Centennial, drive down Sheridan Road and look at the gorgeous view of the water and the green space. And then picture that same view totally blocked by a wall, never to be seen again. Your view of that lake will be totally walled off of Sheridan Road, and that's the end of our 100-year-old trees and the vision of that blue water, which is one of the few visions we have from Sheridan right to the water. The one thing I wanted to point out was there's a document that was passed out at the beach, and I believe it was done by Mr. Ishbia's team. And one of the documents I thought was the most interesting of the whole page was they used the Unified Elder and Centennial Park and Beach before the families of Winnetka missed out, a petition that was done after the first petition that asked to not do the land swap and to get rid of the walls, which had 1,600 signatures. This petition, according to the presentation by Mr. Ishkia's team, says 412 to sign. So I took it upon myself to go through all the signatures on both petitions. And interestingly enough, the signatures on the second petition, there were quite a lot from other communities besides Winnetka. So I thought to myself, gosh, if I didn't live in Winnetka, why would I go online and sign a petition to build a wall on a beach when I don't live there? It's not affecting me as a taxpayer. That's just kind of unusual, doesn't it?
I think your mic is coming out.
Oh, it is, okay. I thought so too, that's why I picked it up. Is that better? Okay, thank you. So that was kind of curious. Why would you sign a petition if you don't live in Winnetka to build a wall on our beaches? The 1600 petition, however, did have some out-of-towners, but think about the people who probably signed that to protect the beaches. Those are people who live in Glencoe, in Wilmette, in Kenilworth. They don't want to see this kind of junk start in Winnetka and then move up and down the North Shoreline. So they're probably very likely to sign the petition to say, don't build on our beach. Then I looked at all the IDNR letters that came through. There were 118 IDNR letters, the exact same letter, 118 times with a different signature. Every one of them was from a Chicago resident saying, we really support this plan. We want to see the wall put on the beach. We really want to do this. This is going to be great for Winnetka. Again, if you live in Chicago, how do you even know that there's a wall going up on the beach in Winnetka? And why the heck would you take the time to write a letter, a form letter that, no, sorry, you can hear you. You can hear me? Okay, good.
We want to record it too, though.
Oh, okay. I'll wait. So 118 letters, all the exact same from Chicago residents wanting this so badly, and there were so many good reasons they had, all the same reasons why it should be built. Meanwhile, there were about 160 letters that were written against the plan, and guess what? Almost every one of them were by Winnetka residents. Now, one of them was a form letter. Every person who wrote their own letter with their own reasons, with their own emotions, saying, I live here, I paid for this, I don't want it. So I hope that the Park District will take that into account when they look at the support. If you just look at the numbers, it's like, wow, 118 people want this wall. Look at where they're from, look at where they're writing, and look at where it's coming from. I know that there has been a PR firm as well as a lobbyist firm hired on behalf of getting the wall built. I don't know who did it, who's paying for it, but it does look like there may be a concerted effort to bring letters in from other places of people who aren't going to be paying for this, not responsible for it. The other thing this Exhibit 4 says is that this project will create a lasting legacy. So what is the lasting legacy? That Winnetka was the first town to ever put a wall on their beach? Do you know that one of the Park Board commissioners told me that they have no precedent for this? They've never seen it. They've never seen the planner project. It's never been done anywhere. The entire Great Lakes, the biggest body of water in the world. And nobody's done this plan, and Winnetka's going to take this chance and put something on our beaches that we don't even know has been proven. And who's going to pay for the upkeep when it doesn't work? And the redoing of it when it's a bad plan and it falls into the lake because it can't withstand the type of beating that everything takes from water, especially in the winter when the ice comes. The other thing that's been very disingenuous about this petition, and I know I have 3 separate friends who said, oh my gosh, I signed it because I thought it was your petition that actually said no wall, because it says on the petition, there's no wall anymore. What they did say was the louvers are the wall. And since the louvers are gone, there's no wall. We all know that's not true. The planter pockets with 10-foot trees that will grow to be 50 feet tall, that's still a wall. You can't walk through it, you can't see through it, it's a wall. And then finally, it says that an incredible amount of time, work, and energy has gone into the 2030 Lakefront Master Plan. I think that's true. A lot of time is spent in that. But that plan was not meant to be an edict for what the Park Board should do. It was meant to be a guideline, a guidepost. It was meant to be organic and changing as new information came out, and as the people of Winnetka actually weighed in and said what's good and bad about this plan. And then finally, time is running out. The Winnetka Park District's financing for the beach will be materially more expensive. The cost may be prohibitive if this project is not in motion by December 2022. Guess what? Today, the Park Board Commissioners told us that actually this isn't exactly true. That money can be used for other things in the park, and they don't know how much I think it's going to cost. No cost has been done. Costa said on the 21st, we will actually have a cost analysis. We will know how much the fire pockets cost. We will know how much the old tank costs, how much the new tank costs, how much the expense is going to cost to maintain this new plant. All that will be available on the 21st. We've been waiting for 22 months for those costs. I hope that they will be as thorough and as accurate as we need them to be. Otherwise, no vote should be taken unless it's to completely get rid of this land swap without the public knowing about it.
Would anybody else like to speak at this time?
Stephanie Garrity, 195 Fuller Lane. Thanks to everybody for coming today. It's important for me to understand what's going on in the park district. So I'm going to make this a little personal because that beach is a beach that I frequent a lot with my family and my neighbors and my friends. On the 3rd of July every year, many children and their families from Fuller, Elder, and neighboring streets come down to the beach to look south and watch the Wilmette fireworks. It's a sweet tradition that we have done for the last 8 years for children. This year, as my 12-year-old Boy Scout son stood on the stage holding a flag and Warren told everyone to go home, all the fireworks were canceled in Winnetka. My children said to Pat, my husband, and I, at least we saw the fireworks from Centennial Beach last. And I thought, next year, we will not be able to watch the fireworks from Centennial Beach. It will be very difficult to see them over large trees that will be planted in planter boxes by the Winnetka Park District to appease one vote system. Please do not allow Winnetka to be the village that sets precedent along the lakefront. Please respect the Illinois Public Trust Doctrine, which states that the Great Lakes are owned in common and to be preserved for the common good, and no private encroachment is allowed. Boyd Beach is a beautiful example of how the public trust doctrine can be upheld. I just wanted to leave you with one last thought, and this is your mission statement: to provide a balance of quality, recreation, and leisure opportunities while protecting assets, natural resources, open space to benefit present and future generations. Please let that be your legacy. Thank you. I actually just have a question.
Yeah, please don't mind.
I'm more having a question than a comment, but I want to just.
Please state your name.
I'm Kane Chu. I live nearby. I actually have a question, but I just want to also, to every single one of you, to say that, you know, as a resident, I highly appreciate, no matter where you stand, that this is a great effort. Within, as you, Warren, earlier indicated, is something we need to do. We have not had beaches for the 3rd year. Our kids do not have access really to something we should. So whatever the plan is, however it goes, whether land swap or what or not, I think Winnetka residents deserves to have some beach back, to have some kind of plan to make this beautiful shoreline work for our kids. So my question is, I understand there are a lot of back and forth with the other residents who live on the south side. Legally, we're talking about these planters, this wall, is he legally to say, like he said, okay, never mind whatever the park district wants, I want a big wall on my property, I'm gonna put all these planters up, doesn't matter what you do.
Is he legally allowed to do that?
No one can erect anything on the lake bed without the permission of the Illinois Department of Natural Resources and the Army Corps of Engineers. They work collaboratively with the IEPA to process any permit application. And it should also be noted that lake bed, anything below high water mark, is owned by the public. That's the genesis of the Public Trust Act. So we don't own it, but we have permission to improve it as a public body. He, as a private property owner, or any other private property owner that has record rights, also has a basket of rights, but they are less than that of a public entity. Could he put up his own planner pocket? That would be only with the consent of these agencies and only after the public review period. We've always known that this public review period would come, the public would have this opportunity to apply. So we are again today faced with applying for a development plan, applying for a permit. That permit will be subject to that same 30-day public review.
So if he were to say, I want to have some plan, behind the high water, I'm gonna put in, big walls on my own property, he still needs approval, or he doesn't?
If you were at the beach today, you saw the seawall that exists.
Yeah.
That seawall is pretty much the demarcation between what is privately owned and what is publicly owned.
Thank you.
There's a longer definition, but for our purposes, it's a seawall. Who else would like to speak?
Mary Jean Murphy, I live at 120 Green. I totally appreciate everything that everybody's done, and my biggest concern is that at this point, there are some people that are looking for the spyglass of this wall and the beach. And we have lost Street Beach, because of our district.
Can you get closer to my mic?
Street Beach is lost because the stairs were not maintained, and so it has now become a private entity because the public doesn't have access to it.
Just to clarify, that's village, not park district.
Okay. But we still, that's something that the park district could have looked at and worked with the village, and it's just gone. And so we've lost that beach. Maple Street Beach is a beautiful beach with a building that is falling apart. That is a beach where the park district activities happen every single summer. Every single summer, middle school madness is there, and there are tons of children there playing, and the park district staff is working their best within that building. It could be so much more. What we have at Tower Beach is incredible, but again, it could be so much more. Centennial Park is beautiful. It is the park is up top of the entertainment. The beach, my question is, how often is it swimmable? No park district activities happen there. I understand that you don't want beach erosion. It will take a long time for that to happen. I'm a Southern California girl. I know big waves, I know sand. It takes a while. You have time to think about the sand and figuring out how to save it. You have time. But why not reallocate, widen our lens a little bit? We've held on to this project so tight that we've lost sight of some of the bigger things that also need to be addressed. And I would encourage you to widen your lens, take a breath, and think about tabling Centennial and considering some of these other buildings and these other places and putting them on the forefront, because our children are using them now every single day.
Anyone else?
Enquist. I'm a resident, 476 Provident Avenue. I really liked what the last speaker said about a broader, more holistic view of all the beaches and the assets. Centennial Beach and Elder Beach together, they're a rare asset. We were lucky to have them. These broad, open, simple sand beaches with a view down to the point where Gilson Park is. And I think a serious holistic plan or strategy is needed for the beach as well as the top park. I haven't really seen what I would consider a holistic plan. Currently, the planning for the beach appears very microscopic. It feels fragmented. It feels very top down. And it's missing community authorship. It's missing a community voice in shaping the future of this beach, as you've heard from so many speakers. We have open views, as I mentioned, all the way south to Gilson Park. We will lose that. We have open, unobstructed sand beaches that are resilient to the rising and lowering lake levels, which we have all just recently witnessed, unexplained, dramatic rising of water. I just attended in Green Bay, Wisconsin, a Great Lakes Commission meeting where they encouraged communities on the Great Lakes, this is both in Canada and the United States, to stop throwing rock in the water as a reaction to the high waters. I feel that the rock wall approach is fragmenting beaches. The proposed planters are fragmenting beaches. The design as a whole is fragmenting the beach into small little pieces. It's an unprecedented idea. As one speaker said tonight, where else on the Great Lakes are you proposing or seeing planters that maybe, I couldn't find the dimensions, but at least 100 feet long? I don't know how wide, but wide enough for big trees, so let's say 12 feet wide. Steel planters that are going to withstand storm surges in the winter, ice buildup in the winter. Steel planters, who's going to maintain these? What's going to happen to these? What's going to happen to the landscape that traps this water? It's an unprecedented idea. I have never seen it on any Great Lake beach, and I just wonder why. I think it's creating, maybe the worst thing is that we lose this asset, this gift that we have. And it's such a terrible precedent. 10 years from now, will we see many more future walls or future planters separating beaches, creating privacy? I don't know, but I think it's a scary thought to think that we will lose the openness that we have today. Again, it's a rare asset. This decision, I think, is just monumental. I encourage you, just as the other speakers have said, to slow down and build a community process for this plan. Thank you.
Hello. I'm Rebecca Ferguson, and I live on Boulder Lane. And I just wanted to come again to mention that the petition that was the original petition that now has 1,635 signatures wasn't only asking to remove the metal wall or whatever we're calling it. I just wanted to take a minute to read for everyone some of the other things that were asked for in that petition. It said, we believe the perimeters could be built to embrace the continuous shoreline access, and they'll have no steel wall, simply rocks with stone quarry steps allowing continuous access along the shoreline. We also do not want movable planting pockets with high trees on Park District property, nor do we want any other proposed element that would eliminate shoreline use/access. We would like the residents and the Park District together, in capital letters, to create and review all plans and modifications for Elder and Centennial, always being mindful of the Illinois Public Trust Doctrine and our beautiful natural shoreline. I would like to agree that funds can be reallocated. We've heard many excellent ideas, places that funds could be used for. I would like to encourage everyone to think outside the box on this and take a pause. And when I was thinking about this, it came to mind the Beatles song, Let It Be. And when I find myself in times of trouble, let it be. And that's my advice. Thank you.
Brett Nelson, 221 Essex Road. The Let It Be portion there, right? I have 4 small children. If we let this be, they will continue to never use this beach and this park like they should. We've lived in the same house for 3 years. We've been to the Elder Beach 3 times. Every time it's been, we've trespassed more or less to see it, right? The fact that this could be what it could be, right? I recognize there's faults. I'm not a professional at these things, right? But I guarantee we'll be using this thing a lot more than 3 times in the next 3 years, probably 3 times per week if this happens, right? I understand the community feedback and all that, right? But I think the whole point of this is for the future use of this, right? My 5-year-old and 3-year-old and 1-year-old must be utilizing this beach versus staring at it right now. So, thank you.
Hello, my name is Karen Borwald. I live at 220 Woodland. First, thank you everybody for your time. You are our neighbors, and I know you put a lot of time into it. And thank everyone in the audience for their thoughtful comments, some of which I agree with, and everyone's really been very polite, and I love to see that. With respect to the beach, big beautiful beach. Who doesn't want a big beautiful beach? It's like asking, do you want a puppy? Sure. But as they say, the devil is in the details. And I think I'm not going to say a lot of things that we talked tonight, but obviously the view is something that's important. The other thing that's beautiful about Centennial is that it is not overdeveloped. That it is beautifully in from the road, quiet and peaceful. And that's something that I think we're going to lose if it becomes something that's a hugely developed beach. I do agree that as custodians of the land, it's important. Okay, as custodians of the land, it's important to.
I swear I put brand new batteries in all this lights. So I'm not sure if it's just the distance away from the sensor or the actual receiver. Let's try that one. Got brand new batteries. I think it's the distance.
You want me to walk over here?
I'm gonna.
Oh,
Sorry.
Hello. Okay, here we go. I understand that it's important to these people there. I think that's something that we should look at. I really agree with kind of taking maybe a step back and taking a holistic view. And if we end up similar to where we are now with a few tweaks, I think that's important. The other thing I did want to mention as one of the details is parking. You're building a huge, big, beautiful beach, and you're not getting any more parking spaces than what you have now. So basically what happens when all the people come to your big, beautiful beach, is that they will park all up and down Elder, all up and down Essex, all up and down Hawthorne. And you become really not a very good neighbor to the people that live in the neighborhood, because we become your parking lot. I'm far enough away that it probably won't hit my house, but I know that it's gonna hit my neighbor. And I think that's something that no one's considered in this plan. And I think it's something that you really do need to take a look at. Because where a lot of small children, our neighborhood has turned over recently. And we have a lot of little bikes and everything else, and they have a lot of traffic just going through the neighborhood and trying to park. It's difficult. Also, if you've ever been a mom and you've taken 3 kids to the beach and you've got beach toys and you've got everything, you don't want to park 3 blocks away. You want to be able to park somewhere near the beach, at the beach. So anyway, that's all. Thank you.
I'm Melissa Mizell from 939 Tower Road. I wasn't intending to speak tonight. I think others have spoken very well. But there was one thing I heard mentioned in several comments that I just think it's worth drawing attention to. And that is the wealth of the individual who's most in favor of this plan. It's news to me that Winnetka is, hotbed of income equality activism. And I think you can make this decision on the merits without implying that there's a right or a wrong amount of money for an individual to have. I think it would be very much a pity if the public formed the impression that decisions were governed by personal factors like that, as opposed to the merits of a given proposal.
Okay, not seeing any more public comment. This is a workshop session, so we are going to present for discussion purposes a proposal, and then we are looking for your input on specific designs as well. So I think that start with Costa presenting or thinking modified plan that addresses some of the concerns we've heard, and go from there. Just want to scoot back, make sure that everybody can see. I apologize. You use that or? Yeah. Nope. Let's get it up. Get a bullhorn here in a second. Is better? Yeah. All right, my apologies, and thank you for bearing with us with these technical difficulties. I do apologize. So, as we've discussed tonight, and I just want to thank everybody for your time and patience. I know this has been a long evening, and I know there's been a lot of time spent, not only this evening, but on several occasions, to voice your concerns around this project. So, very thankful and grateful for your time. I would like to start off by making sure everybody is aware, this is not by any means a final plan. What I am presenting tonight is a draft concept based on the community input that we've heard over the last several sessions. This plan is far from perfect. This is a workshop opportunity to present something to the public based on what we heard, so we can hear back the pros and the cons, the innovation and the great ideas that I know you're going to bring forward to us to mend and mold a plan that the entire community is going to enjoy for years to come, years to come. So with that being said, this is what has been presented. This is on the website. Once again, I'm sure everybody here on the left side or right side see good because of the cutoff, but
version of that plan. So what you're going to see here is several different things that we had as takeaways. One thing that we heard was to identify buildings solely on Park District land. And that's what you can see represented here. This is a single source breakwater system. This is a non-combined breakwater system. So to give bearing, the left side of the screen here, this portion is Elderly Beach as we know it, existing beach house with the existing drive down to the beach house. We have 261 Sheridan Road in the middle, and then we have Centennial Park as we know it to the right. Starting from right to left, or in no particular order, we have the breakwater design. This breakwater design is, in comparison, very similar to what we had previously presented, with a couple adjustments. One, for those of you who were on site will have noticed a slight change in regards to location. The location here that's been noted, once again, is entirely on Park District land. The previous iteration of this design did have the center line of the breakwater bisecting the property line, which is proposed here, the land trade. Now, once again, based on some more community input that we heard tonight, one of the things that we'll take a look at, depending on the property exchange agreement, is the position of this as it relates into its current form. So that'll be something I'm sure we'll discuss later.
Can you point out the actual property line that you're referencing? Is it black dotted line or the
blue dotted line here is the proposed transition line for the if we do the property exchange. The red line here, which I apologize is kind of getting cut off the screen, is the existing property line that would go through here. So that's the 70 feet to the south.
Can you go back?
Where is the property line?
Go back one slide. There. Yes.
So these illustrations are the handouts that were at the front table. So if you grab one of the packets on the way in, you have this in front of you as well. So the line here, as I suggested, is the 70 foot. This right here at the edge of the photograph is the existing property line as we know it for Centennial Park. This is the proposed property exchange line, taking into consideration if we're able to come to terms with the property exchange. Once again, something for the park board to decide as they move forward. As we look to the design here, the planter box as presented is a cost alternative that we looked at to try to reduce cost and to reduce the amount of stone. Once again, we've heard more comments related to this as setting precedent for the future. So this is surely something we'll have to take another look at. But once again, showing a 9-foot width here at the eastern end, taper into a 60-foot width at the western end, holding a line of steel on the south to create that hardened edge where we need it. And then on the interior, where we'll have the zone for the swim beach, this is going to be the Rosetta Stone in principle, pretty similar exactly to what we've done, design material, similar to what we've done over at Lloyd on the bluff itself, the southern bluff at Lloyd.
Can we ask questions as you go along here, Costa, or not?
I'm open to that, as long as the board's fine with me taking fielding questions as we go.
I'm not debating here. So the curved part of this really doesn't, it's not functional. It's not providing, a barrier against wave energies. Is that what you're telling me right now?
John, so this inner edge here, it does probably a little bit, but not to the point where we can change this. We would be able to change this into a straight line if we decided to, or change this to stone as been proposed tonight.
So I guess the question would be, if you just lifted, that second line, could the single straight line provide what you need?
Sure, and that's like to Warren's point when we were at Centennial Beach. I'm not sure if everybody got a chance to hear him, but one of the original plan designs back from November, Warren correct me, was that 2020, I believe, had the breakwater as situated with a single line of stone carrying back without a planter pocket to gain further reach. So John, that is something that could be looked at when reviewing that.
Yeah.
As we continue down and look at the landing point here, I apologize, my hand is shaky as it's by nature. But you'll see here at the end or the western edge, there is now a riparian zone where we're allowing and showing access points. So somebody who can walk from the north side of the structure down a staircase to the south side of that structure. So that was something that we had identified and we heard and listened to and made sure we included in.
Is it possible to zoom in to that area?
Unfortunately, no, but once again, those handouts that everybody has, you'll have that in front of you as well.
It's just so small here. I mean, yeah.
Sir, I apologize, it's not a PowerPoint, format, so I can't really zoom in on here, so I apologize.
Do you have a side view?
I do have a side view, which we'll get to in a moment. So as we continue through, once again, showing that we have now considered access across the structure here and to allow the riparian rights to be transferred across. The ADA access walkway, as you see it from the top of the table land, is still complete, and we did make sure that we are able to land that in the ADA capacity of a small landing here that allows the access across to be at an elevation of 289, even with the top of the wall to walk across, as well as a walkway back. So there'll be a staircase going down for beach access here, and then a walkway back, a ramp to get you down to the beach itself. Once again, without the phase 2 of the boardwalk and without consideration for the building in the center of 261, we wanted to make sure that we maintain this ADA access and the facility, or to facilitate the access to the beach in that capacity. The blue structures that you'll see.
Does it go from right to left and back?
So the single walkway here, it comes at a slope that is a single pass down. I believe it's 5 foot width. You'll land at a transition point here where that walkway then would traverse back due north, and that access walk, or in this case ramp, would ramp down ending roughly right about here to a landing zone for ADA.
So Phil's asking about a red line that's also not, so what you're saying is this picture shows 70 feet left of shoreline next to us.
This concept still allows the possible transition of the exchange. If that doesn't happen, then that can be adjusted.
The question is just about the
Yeah, so this does still have the 70 feet to the south.
We're looking at the beach right now, it's supposed to be 70 feet shorter than what we own right now. Is that correct?
That is correct. With
And so
the,
do you have a rendition that shows you what you own and what you have already?
so once again, and I apologize, this is where the red line is that's shown on the handout that was there. It's on the far right edge of the sheet that you might have in front of you. That's the existing property line, that 70 foot dimension off of the toe of the stone. Roughly is about another 30 foot in here, 30 to 35 feet. Once again, that trapezoid shape of what the breakwaters are designed to keep that toe of the stone entirely on Park District property, because that was something else that we heard through previous community discussions, to make sure that all the Park District property stayed or assets stay on Park District property.
So I get that, but everything in between those two breakwaters is not squish in your development in by 70 feet. So the promise of this beach is what you own right now isn't really picture. Is that correct?
Once again, this is a workshop depiction draft, just to have us to work off of something. If, for whatever reason, the board comes to a determination where they're not going to pursue the property exchange, then we would look at this in a different light, and it would be a adjusted concept to adjust to those parameters. But currently, that's what we've designed.
I'm
Sure. No problem.
I would expect to see what we own in the design.
Sure.
And if there is a spot, then we have to decide. It seems like the word in my heart is turned around.
No problem. And in no disrespect to the community, this was just continuing on with our current design. And once again, in this draft works out concept. And this is something that we're going to go back with. And I'm sure that I'm not speaking out of turn. We'll have more community input and more community workshops to be able to further this plan design so we get to the proper landing where the community and the board agree.
Okay, I'm getting like, can you just tell me how far the planter box will go out on that curve?
So the dimension of the planter box is still the same dimension as it's always been, 100 feet. That is not a change since day one to current. That's still 100 feet per second from here to here.
I can't tell what they are.
I'm sorry, Keith, what's that?
The blocks, what are they?
You're saying that the images here?
It's like go past the planter box, there's 4 boxes.
Right, that's just a representation of the actual crest of the breakwater design. that is breakwater, rubble gum stone that's placed. That is not planter box or planting material, that is stone. Sure.
So would the planters go up to the top of the stone ridge? Is that what that's showing?
The elevation of the planter box, as it's shown here, this is the 100-foot limitation. So as we presented today, the first 20 feet here at 589, it drops a foot from 589 down to 588. That foot drop carries for 30 feet. And then at 50 feet overall from the toe of the breakwater, it drops another elevation of a foot down to 587. That 587 meets the stone at 100 foot. At 100 foot, as it works out, that stone will taper 1 foot over the duration of 185 feet to the end of the breakwater. It'll have a 1 foot elevation drop over that 185 feet. So very flat line drop throughout. But the transition is here from stone to steel, as it's shown here as well in elevation. The first line here, the long line as we presented at Centennial and Lloyd today, you can see the elevation as it relates to the sand. The second elevation as it relates to the planter boxes and the steps elevation throughout is shown, as well as the red line is shown for the stone, the existing stone elevation at Lloyd.
Can you tell us at the water line with the wall would be?
At the water line, what would the wall be? So Katie, please elaborate to that. Is that here?
So we're late at 580, and the top of the wall is 588.
Top of the wall at 587. The stone elevation is at 587. So at a 580 lake elevation or elevation, there would be a 7-foot differential.
And that's with nothing planted.
There will be nothing planted in the stone itself.
Right, because of the year.
Yeah.
I get to that line. Thank you. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
So on the exhibit, it's really tough on the pixelation. Put it profile, please. The red line that's at the top, the highest one, that's the existing as-built elevation of Lloyd. So when we went to Lloyd tonight, we saw the stone. That red line is reflective of the top of the stone at Lloyd. So what we're trying to illustrate in this exhibit is that what's being proposed in Centennial is lower than what's at Lloyd, substantially lower. It starts, instead of 591, starts at 589, and then it steps down to 587. By the time you get all the way up to the end of the breakwater, it's 586, which is similar to the end elevation of Lloyd. It's just that Lloyd rises faster, so it obscures more of what's being proposed. And I don't see the elevations necessarily changing so much because remember that steel wall is Centennial. That's a 589. And that's existed, stood the test of time, including 2020. So if we start at 589, taper down from there, we're going to preserve more views than you have Lloyd.
I think the other important thing is we're adding a lot of beach depth. It's when you go down to Lloyd, you see an enormous amount of beach with that. So there will be, I don't know how many feet of beach depth will be added because of the required sand.
Yeah, to be more explicit, at Lloyd, we added 7 feet of sand. So the Lloyd beach elevation was raised 7 feet from the sand. That's why when you're standing on the beach at Lloyd, you still can see out, see over the rocks, because your feet are at 587 back there, and the top of the rocks are at 587, 586. No problem seeing over it. When you're standing at Centennial, your feet are much lower than they would be once this plan is built, due to the build.
Did you want to add anything, Coach?
Well, I mean, to that point, as whoever attended Centennial saw the lines directly in front of you, the yellow line is what's proposed elevation for sand, and the green line would be the extended height of the planter pocket. Now, I will say with no planting material. The planting material, as has been suggested today with proposals from Orchard 2020, none of that has been vetted out. So this is a workshop meeting to understand what the community is seeking, and there's been no designation of that. We assume student grasses, rhododendrons, things of that nature, things that are limited to a few feet in height, not necessarily trees and other things. So I just want to make sure the community understands that, The presentation that a lot of people received at the site is the requested presentation, or in this case, the request from Orchard, not necessarily where the Park District is endorsing. So just to clarify that point, so everybody understands.
So the numbers that you're giving are GLD, and you're giving them off the current level of films, or are you giving them off the film?
We're giving off of baseline benchmarks that we have, and the best benchmark to go off of for everybody is the steel that is the back edge wall of Centennial Beach. That was what I would reference from. Off of the seawall back there, 589, that's gonna be your best point of reference when you're, if you wanna go down there and view this, measure off of that as your data point.
So I read the application, you're talking about filling with 23,000 cubic yards of imported sand, which translates to about 30,000 tons. We can picture that as a dimension of the football field. A tremendous amount of fill I've never seen before. It has 30,000 tons of imported sand and filling Lake Michigan. So as we think of ourselves as stewards of the beach, state park, which is Lake Michigan, and we feel we need to put in 30,000 tons of sand. That really something that our commissioners who are here and spend a lot of time on it understand that we're turning water into treatment, and that's not necessarily going to benefit everyone. So that kind of information I think we need to speak about it. When you get the GOP dimension, and you put that much sand into your breakwater, which is required, you have 100% overflow.
Correct. Yep.
Are your measurements on top of that?
Our measurements are from the current topography that is on the lake today. So that's what our measurements are from. So our fill volumes that are being shown here in these depictions are based on the coastal engineering and the design parameters that we have contracted with Shavik and their team to help us design. So those numbers are derived from the coastal engineering that supports these breakwater structures. Now, I will say the previous numbers were inclusive of the team and the entire project as a whole. We have not gone back and completed that engineering because that now comes with an additional cost. So we wanted to land on design before we move forward with, once again, more costly, projects, or in this case, costly examples on how to drive to those numbers. So that's something we're trying to be mindful of. But you are right, there's a lot of fill coming in, and that's by design. Two, one, to help the project and build the sandbags we have beaches to have for people to lay, lounge, and enjoy, but also put back into the lake and get back into the coral drift that's being robbed by a lot of the different projects that are out there. Sure.
Also, on the same.
So I apologize, this gentleman has his hand up for a while.
Okay, thank you. I just want to make sure on your next side view.
Yep.
That I understood properly our conversation while we were at it. As I understand it, I think Warren, a lot of this was your point, that at the time Lloyd was designed and then built, you were coming off of our high water marks for the lake. An extraordinary damage that's been done at Lloyd, including along all the slopes at that time. Your design for Centennial is the black line, right, which is lower than what the Lloyd reference point would be. And what I thought I was understanding is that you could get away with you feel like you can get away with a lower wall now in that area closest to the shore, based on the relevance for that beach, as well as just what you've learned in terms of what you built at Lloyd. There's more rock at Lloyd than you Lloyd. Did I get that right?
Yes.
Okay. So
if I can add, we haven't fully coastal designed this new imagery. So that's based on principle, but until it's fully vetted, I don't want to go into it. People understand.
So it might be that black line might be a little the engineering.
It should be where it's at, but as suggested today, we could possibly bring that down. I just don't want to suggest that we could bring it down 2 feet and then have the project fail. I want to make sure we're doing the proper engineering to support this.
So right now, in this design, the right-hand side of the slide includes these plantings that many of us have voiced concerns about. This pocket thing.
This design has a pocket, basically the planter pocket, as we've been calling it, but we did not put any material in there as far as floor or anything. This is just by elevation for reference.
But it could be, you could just do rock.
We could extend rock back too, but once again, that's at a
And when
cost.
you did rock, it would be at the black line, not at the red line.
If we did rock, with whether we hold at 587 where it terminates now and carry that back, or if that has to rise back up, once again, we would want to make sure that we have coastal engineering to support whatever we do.
Okay, but again, just to be clear, because we keep putting Lloyd up as a reference point. And whether we do steel or we do rock, it's going to be at this lower elevation because of what you've learned at Lloyd and what you believe you need it to.
Can I add something? So the difference between steel and stone, whatever we do, we have to penetrate the clay. So if we're gonna put rock in, we're gonna dig all the sand out until we hit clay. Then we'll dig some clay out and we'll build up with rock. If we don't do that, the risk is sand erodes, everything collapses. If you use steel, you drive right through the sand, right into the clay, and you're done. That's the simplicity of the steel solution. And that was the original idea. Single line of steel out 100 feet saves a whole lot of rock and a whole lot of shit.
So the way I netted on that, from our conversations with each of the day tonight, is that this really comes down to cost and aesthetics. So a lot of us who are here because we really didn't like the aesthetics associated with the wall. And I'm not that much more thrilled about planter pockets or whatever you call them. I know rock today because my boat's right there at Lloyd. So I kind of get that. I'm comfortable with that as much as I didn't like the idea. So it seems to me that what a lot of the feedback, aside from the fact that you need a whole lot more community engagement on this, I'm all for really slowing down and making sure that you've got everybody on board before you push ahead on this. Where I'm netting with all the information you've shared in this workshop is we've got a cost consideration to make sure that we can protect this beach. And those have aesthetic trade-offs, and we need to take those through, present them clearly to the rest of the village, and get feedback on it, and see what the village thinks.
Right, Nash?
I would add to his nice summary, from my perspective, there's a third piece, which is trust. And what I hear is planter pockets have people being distrustful because of Fortune 2020's, I'm going to use the word propaganda. But it could be something else. And I would assume if there were a deficit of trust, a legal entity like a restricted covenant or something could solve that problem for you. I mean, there's got to be some method by which the board can bind itself and successor boards to control the height. And then you can have an honest discussion about aesthetics and survivability and height. And we are past the discussion of trust, because like many other people, I greatly appreciate all of your time and service. But there's a trust deficit, I think, is what I hear. And that to me strikes me, I mean, is that doable? Some kind of covenant that keeps it to a certain elevation? Maintenance?
I don't feel comfortable to speak on that directly because I don't know, but I'd
answer yes, a covenant, and it would probably come in the form of whatever permit restrictions or permit restrictions are voluntarily implied or imposed. Remember that we don't own the lake bed. We are permitted to improve the lake bed as a public entity for the benefit of the public. All of what we're doing here is to provide greater public access. And I just, if I could editorialize for a second about all of the existing, go to the other slide. It's not a pristine beach. There are a number of steel jetties that interrupt the beach. There's a zero-inch chain link fence that got wiped out. We're currently not in keeping with dog beach standards. Dogs can run on the private property. That's a problem. We have wooden posts. We have dilapidated cabin baskets. We have a stormwater discharge, 75 years old with a pier that's falling apart. This is not pristine. It needs a lot of work to put it safe, and the plan, the vision, is to provide that continuous expansive reach.
So one more question is, can you have the walkway not right up at the top there, right there? If people care enough, you can move it down to the middle of the planter box, as you call it?
Yeah, I mean, where the location of it has been identified as the most protected location. That's the reason we selected that, because it's the most out of harm's way. If we move it to the east, whatever dimension, it's possible, but then under different lake conditions, depending on the elevation of the stand on the south side, it's hard to say that that will always be dry. There might be an opportunity or a point in time where it's in the water, or it is you're walking into water, but that would be a possibility.
Costa, can a commissioner ask a question?
It's an open forum.
Thank you. Like Mary Garrison, I'm a historian. And so I heard tonight, the first time, that in November of 2020, you were looking at a single steel groin. My question to you is, how did we migrate from steel groin to this unique and I believe unprecedented concept of planter pocket? Was this something that Shavika and your team came up with, or was this a collaborative effort arrived upon in an informal, I'll say partnership with the Orchard 2020 team? Can you answer that question for me?
Yeah, Warren answered that earlier tonight. This was a collaboration with the Orchard team to find a suitable middle ground.
Thank you. And then I'd like to speak about restricted covenants. You can have all sorts of legal documents. The devil is in the making of it all. And so when we're thinking about this long term, we have to remember that, things don't always get well maintained. In fact, Cindy Schreiber took me out to Waukegan Harbor. And what I saw there was somewhat disturbing, not at the harbor itself, but around the beach, in the fact that plantings had been planted and nobody was maintaining it. Nobody was making sure that it stayed at a certain level. So there you were. Here was this beautiful lake. You couldn't see anyway. I'll shut up, but thank you.
I felt like there was a comment over here. So I apologize. Is there one? Somebody else? Sorry, lady in the back.
I'm confused as to the assertion that planter pockets of steel will save us money over construing the wall in stone when no cost has been given for the planter pocket. I mean, and especially since they're unprecedented, when something new, generally it tends to be pretty darn expensive. So I don't see how they can be counted as a cost saving measure when the costs run down, and since they're new, we have no idea what the maintenance would be over a period of time.
I just want to ask Lisa to answer your question by articulating the number of times you have gone back to cost out this project and the component and the process and the variability. Because I think it's informative, because this guy has to make all the calls and has to make all the adjustments and has to gather all the information. And it has not been easy in a dynamic pricing environment. And so I'm grateful to him. And now he's looking at trying to pull it all together. Thursday, which I think is going to be difficult. So I'd like to hear from Costa what that process looks like, just your.
Sure. So, Christine, thank you. When I look at the components here, and to your point that, something that's unprecedented and hasn't been done before, there is unique. But working through our civil engineers and working with our structural engineers, coming up with the understanding of how many linear feet of materials that are going to be needed, the fill requirements for that board that's being created, the slab material, diversifying what is stone for settling and water erosion control, as well as fill material that is for suitable planting material. We've looked at this from head to toe. And I'm comfortable to understand the question as it relates to cost. This is based on the assumptions in a perfect world environment that our methods in which we're designing this to come to fruition. There's always an opportunity for something to change. And to Christina's point, every time we look at a different iteration, I go back and reanalyze the work that needs to be done. I work with the team behind me to reevaluate the amount of materials that are needed, the depths that are needed, looking at the topography as far as where clay elevations are compared to the structural load limits of what we need to achieve for those to be suitable. And those all come into the design parameter. It's not me just saying, oh, yeah, well, that looks like $500,000 per foot. That's what we're going to go with. There's a lot of information that goes into this to better understand how this all works together. And you're right, in a lake environment, this is an unknown. These are, I don't want to say best guesses, but they're based on the information that we have with changing lake conditions and lake bed down cutting. The farther we go out, if there's further erosion, we have to dig deeper, and that means more rock has to be put in. That means more sand has to be brought in, and those are things that are variables that are unknown and change in this dynamic of the lake conditions. Right now, we're probably to the plus $400,000 for the sand because we waited and sand has come back. But by design, we're trying to build something that's sustainable in its design to be self-supported in a system that's an ever-changing ecological system. So working with Shabika, Charlie, and their team from Shabika Associates, combined with our civil engineers, that's how we're trying to get this to some of those determinations. But as suggested on the 21st, we'll have better answers. They're never going to be 100%, but they're going to be best on the information that we have at that time.
I see Chuck shaking his head. Can I try and synthesize or distill some of this? It's about unit pricing. Cost to drive a lineal foot of sheet pile. The cost of a ton of stone or a cubic yard of sand. And different plant permutations of different combinations of these materials. Multiply it by the known unit cost, and we can get the price. Problem in today's environment, the unit costs are very volatile. And that's what we've been trying to deal with. As the cost of steel goes up, the steel sheet piling becomes less desirable. The cost of trucking stone, let's try and find a native stone, maybe to use quartz in the outer reaches, and we use limestone, which is sourced locally, shorter trucking distance for some of the near the bluff. No, I think
would it be better to say you really don't know the price differential?
No, we're saying we're
Say you
constantly.
know that the sheet piles are less expensive. I think that was the point.
Yeah, the sheet piles were
So
$2,000
why not just
a
say
linear
that?
foot. The sheet pile was $2,000 a linear foot, and now it's gone up to $3,4,200. Bill, Nyquist, please.
Thank you. I'd like to step back a minute because we're getting really into the details of a construction drawing. If this is really a community workshop, it would, I think, have been helpful to show all three alternatives that were possible. One is the single steel wall, or whatever you call it, the steel breakwater. The second is the steel planter that is 100 feet long and 60 feet wide. And the third is the idea of the rock, continuing the rock. Aren't those the three alternatives? And in each one, and I know this is all in the conceptual stage, so the prices aren't going to be set. But you could have alternative A, B, C with conceptual prices A, B, and C, and this group could participate as a real workshop. I think that would have been much more meaningful. This is feeling very defensive. We're asking questions, you're defending staff design. So
So that doesn't feel like we're not trying to defend this design, we're simply trying to explain the parameters that drive this.
Fine.
So, that's
I mean, we can keep going, talking about the details, whether it's curved, or whether it's straight, or whether it's moved to the west or the east, all of that, all of those are good questions. But is this the time for us to be zeroing in on those details? Or should we step back and look at these three broader alternatives?
Well, I think I'm grateful for that summary, because what we're trying to tease out of the community is, in fact, what are the most important components to you? So we've heard maybe planner pocket at some, what is that cost? What does that look like? What is the elevation? So tonight we assessed or tried to illustrate the elevation. The cost is a difficult component, but I think that you articulated what you've heard in this room tonight, which is, what is steel wall? What is rock? Because we've heard a lot more conversation about rock from people who did it crazy about rock before. And then what is the medium outcome, which is plain. So that's come out of this conversation tonight. So to me, that's very useful, and that gives us some alternatives to explore and to price. I'd like to hear some other conversation about other aspects of the.
I know that John Rood wanted to make a presentation. Do you want to do that, John, before we
Take cost off the book here. I'd be happy to go ahead and go with that. But I'm gonna get.
If I can just finish up at Elders, just like we haven't had a chance to get across to the other beach, talk about that real quick. But I mean, hearing more community input tonight is fantastic. What we heard on the beaches at the two different sites, understanding that, well, why can't it just be rock in a lower elevation? It's a great point. But without hearing that from the community, we didn't know what to expect. We heard riparian rights, which we've modified to. We've heard no plantings or low plantings, no steel, trying to identify the walls. Well, we took an opportunity to show you the actual elevations of those walls, which is lower than what the proposed steel or stone was at Boyd. Just trying to make sure that all the information that is being presented is not only presented, but is presented where it's understood. Because there's been a lot of false rumors out there of what people are expecting this to look like. 13-foot towering wall where, we're in a prison. And that's not the case. And I just want to make sure people understand what we're trying to do. And this isn't the end all that be all. This is our opportunity to work with the community to figure out the best next step. And that's what we're driving towards, the next best step.
Before this slide goes away, can I just ask a question about the property line? Because what I see that line coming from on the right-hand side, coming up, and then there's.
I moved it here so you can see the entire property, and it was cut off in the screen.
I didn't have your.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You just the east-west line, which is going up. And then you have the steel wall, which is to its left, which means that there's, I'm eyeballing here, something like a 15 or 20 foot space.
This is 35 feet, if that's what you're referring
Okay,
to.
35-foot space that is on the other side of our steel wall. Why not put the wall on the property line?
So if we were to put the wall on the property line, the wall would have to bifurcate the steel or the stone structure, and the overall width of the structure is about 70 feet, roughly about 35 per side of where we dip down underneath. So for us to build this toe of the stone here shown on the south side would have to be within our property. To be able to take this whole design and move it further south is another thing that we're hearing tonight, is to make use of the entire Centennial site. Don't take into consideration with any exchange and come back with 3 plans that have been talked about here tonight at the next workshop session. That's what I'm hearing so far.
Well, I'm also asking, is there a 35-foot wide 3D from the east to the west, for the private property owner on the south side of this property?
No, the 70-foot property line that would kind of fall right around here. I apologize, it's cut off. I'm gonna move back to here so you can see it a little bit better. This is the 70 feet, which is identical with the 70 feet here. The 35 is just to allow for this toe of stone to fall within the Park District's property and not fall in the the adjacent property owner's property.
Let me try to answer that more succinctly. The old plan, the plan that we were looking at a few weeks ago, had the steel right at the 70-foot mark. That was a concession from Mr. Ishbia to allow the stone that's further out to encroach upon his riparian zone. We wanted to be able to permit something independent of Mr. Ishbia. Thus, we moved it north so that that big triangle of stone way out in the lake doesn't encroach upon his riparian zone. We could push it back the other way, and we could, and then under the idea in our permits, we'd have to build it first, and then you can convey it. But you can't convey a permit.
But the point is, the wall's gotta go into the middle of the stone, I think is what.
The wall's gotta go in the middle of the stone, correct?
Correct.
And the binding constraint is the furthest out bottom of the base of the triangle shaped stone underwater.
We'll just stand back and we'll have better knee-high water.
Say louder, please.
South of the groin, and he only gets knee-high water.
I can't, I'm sorry, we can hear.
If you pull the sand back, knee-high water will be further, west.
Okay, yeah, it's not a function of pulling the sand back. The coastal engineering said, we need to have stone at 587, otherwise wave action's gonna come right over the top of it. And that's kind of the driver of the whole plan. And then we get back to the wall, current wall's at 589, you saw that at Centennial today. So we're using that as a starting point, and we're stepping down to 587.
How are those trees further there, those on the right side, and how tall are those trees? Because the trees at the top will also, when you come into the park, block the view, north and south, and the bluff's about 15 feet higher than the steel wall. So how high are those trees, and are they already there?
So the tree shown here on the south elevation here at Centennial is a mixed match of old trees and new trees based on some trees that would have to be removed and trying to replant those trees that are removed. So it's a mixed match
So how high?
and depending, I don't have the list with me as far as what the species variations are for those deciduous trees, but they vary in height. There's oaks, there's maples, there's hickories, there's an abundance of different trees. But potentially, but once again, the canopy height, when you're at base level standing in the park, you're looking underneath the canopies of those trees, so you're not. So your views aren't impeded as possibly being suggested.
You can't look over yourself, the trees very low.
So, but yeah, let's focus in on the breakwaters. Let's keep moving forward here. The blue lines are identifying structures that are going to be coming out as part of this design. Once again, this is a steel jetty that's going out currently. This is the dilapidated fence here that is in poor capacity and needs to be removed. These have been identified as some of the wood structures that are in there as well. Once again, kind of more of a hazard or a hindrance than anything else. These black lines here are just denoting the property. So the dotted lines are showing the property lines 4261. The red line or the magenta line here is the existing steel jetty that goes out 204 feet, if I'm not mistaken, is its current dimension. Not 100% on that, I believe, but like 99% is 204 feet. This is on Park District property here, so that would stay, and that's being proposed to stay to help backfill the north cell here for Elder. The existing pier, as shown here in blue outline, does get removed, and in doing so, the conveyance, and this is probably a better illustration, as Warren was talking about earlier, the culmination of all the conveyance that comes together at the beginning of Elder that comes straight back is going to be picked up with two new water quality structures. Those structures then are going to bring back to one steel structure here that'll take that stormwater back and then out the actual breakwater. So there'll be a drop structure at the top of the bluff, and then that'll carry the water down into the breakwater, and that water will stop about 2/3 of the way down the breakwater where it's shown. I'm getting cut off by the screen here, so I apologize. It should be somewhere in this vicinity roughly. The breakwater design here, as it's shown, is similar capacity where it is a steel planting pocket with a riparian zone on the far western edge to walk across to gain access to the north side of the north side of Centennial Beach. as well as being mindful of the property line on the north side for Centennial, keeping the toe of the stone for the breakwater itself, once again, within the Park District property. That breakwater goes out about 245 feet overall. And the conveyance access that's shown here, being picked up from the parking lot, is the way that we're going to be able to get down, not only to save costs and construct the project initially, but in perpetuity, be able to maintain this at a lower cost as well. For sand erosion or anything else that needs to be done, or maintaining the facility or the beaches can be done in that capacity. So that'll be a cost savings in the future as well. Those are things that have been designed into this, similar as they were before, but once again, being mindful of our direction. So,
Yes.
I apologize.
A couple of questions. The current concrete pier where the current storm sewer flows out of is going to be gone.
Right.
You're moving the new storm sewer to near my property line. And when it gets to the end of that pipe underneath the drawing, how does that water get dissipated? Because it looks like the end of the pipe is not anywhere near the end of the drawing, so the pipe does curve and go out. So if there is a southerly breeze, I'm sure that nobody on Fuller Lane cares about this. But is all that effluent, and I've seen it, if any of you have happened to have been at the beach when there's a big rainfall, and all the fishers know this, there's a lot of brown water running out, and there are multiple storms up down Village Winnetka. So what happens, it's not clear to me, does this kind of dribble out through the rocks, or is this underground, or where's the end of that pipe?
Sure. The reason that pipe terminates within the breakwater structure itself is because of the IPA, the velocity restrictions that we have going into the lake. So the rubber mound stone breakwater acts as the diffuser to break that velocity down, because we're only able to dissipate at a certain rate. So that's the reason that it's been chosen to terminate where it is currently. So the structure itself, as we've designed in at Lloyd, breaks down that velocity. To your point, John, in regards to where does that flow out of southern breeze, that water would dissipate and, in theory, continue to push out towards the lake. Can I tell you with 100% certainty that there's no possibility of it coming your way? No, I can't. But the design method is to push that into the lake as far as we can without going out and creating another structure to just worry about terminating for that.
The second question, I'm going to be living with a little bit of truck traffic. These big dump trucks that are bringing lots of the time. There could be, I don't know how many hundreds or thousands of those that it will take. Is that traffic going to be bringing the stones in for growing on the south end of the property as well? And or is there going to be another driveway going into the south end of the property?
The original proposal allowing the conveyance of the property in the center allows us to build both structures from the north access point. We would have to look in further and understand if our ability to cross 261 is there to keep going with that, and our ability to work that through the lake to erect the south structure, or if that has to be done through a separate access point from Centennial, that still has to be determined with this new design as we've seen in front of us without 261 potential.
Construction by barge.
The design for that we've been proposing is land-based construction, a significant cost reduction and time reduction based on the preventable working days that are on the lake.
Won't the lake in this way, so the stormwater would come in?
It depends on certain days, there is a possibility. So it all depends on which way the storms are headed or the wind conditions are. But with all the improvements that are there and the existing stormwater outfall, we're looking to improve upon that stormwater discharge. And the village has done a nice job of trying to correct any issues associated with that.
Two technical questions. To play on Warren's suggestion, that we have to do a lot of big down cutting in order to keep these rocks, and is that correct, Warren, what you just said?
Lakebed down cutting is a coastal engineering term of waves. You erode the clay. We would stone on sand, you wanna put it, you embed it in the clay.
I get that 100%. My question is, I could not, and we read in detail, from both the several times, once submitted to the regulator. How much clay are you removing from the state? What's the cubic yardage of that?
It's minimal at best. They try to rework it into the structure as they can. I mean, for Lloyd, I think we might have lost, I don't know, 5 truckloads overall in the entire project.
And if you're not working by barge, you're gonna have your machines in the water.
Correct.
And so the neighbor should know that there's no pollution control on this, and there never has been on any of these structures. And so, I guess what is there 1 or 2 marine, I mean, when you send this out to bid, how many different people build these things? How many different entities?
There's few contractors that do this work. It's not as common, but there are several that do this work. Our last bid netted 2 returns on our bid. It was Tino and Michael's Materials were the 2 that returned bids. We're hopeful that we can get more bids from like a Stalwart or other people that do this work as well, but it all depends on how they're booking their jobs for the next season. This project in scale and size, some of the smaller contractors, like a Gillen and so forth, might not be capable to handle a job like this, meet the bonding requirements and the amount of machinery needed to facilitate the work. But I can assure you, as when we build Lloyd, the Michael's Tino lease, and I would assume Tino as well, or whoever might potentially win this job, is more than aware of the working requirements within the lake and make sure that their machines are capable to do so without causing any problems.
That brings my last question from the phone. You were right, you lied, but I can go back over and over. In your opinion, and given what you just said about only having 2 contractors, would it financially be wise to let this set as the material costs begin to go down and work on something that might go into construction a year from now or spring?
Right now, because of where we're at, we're looking at spring 2023 at the earliest, to be perfectly honest. So where the cost might be with fuel or the downturn of the economy, I couldn't tell you by net from there to there. But those are things that the board will have to take into consideration when they move forward and make ultimately a decision on how they want to proceed.
So how much do the planning projects cost? We've asked for 7 weeks. I know you have been.
We can't answer that question. We've asked it a hundred times. Come July 21st, we'll have cost information.
What's the old cost? A cost, between 2.
Moving on.
I also want to say that we're not 100% sure that costs are going to come down in this field, because remember the Build Back Better funds have left a lot of municipalities flush with cash that they have not yet used, and it's unclear whether or not they're going to use that cash for these kinds of projects, which is what they have scheduled it for, or if they're going to have to fund the shortfall of Cook County tax receipts. So we talked to all of our bankers about changing the use of funds because we were going to have some delays here. And I continuously ask them, what do you see on the landscape of projects? How full is this population of construction people? How busy are they? How big is their book? How far out are they booking? Because I don't necessarily want to pay top dollar either. And so I'm just trying to figure out the dynamics of federal funds, recession possibilities, and Cook County tax implications.
Also, just one question. When you are doing all these construction, there's a line in Outer Lane Park that goes down to the north end. Is that the construction route?
This line here is the proposed line for the stormwater discharge relocation. That's what that dotted line is.
Okay, so when you are doing this, whether or not with the land swap, how much impact is it gonna have for the existing, Outer Lane Park and Centennial Park? Because we have some very old trees.
Sure.
Like assets in the village.
And yes.
And yes, sorry, and then on top of that, Centennial, when you look at it right now, it's beautiful, clear. Outer Lane is overgrown for years. And whoever walks there, sits there, a lot of my in-laws that are getting older, they used to go to sit on the bench and look at the lake. And you used to be able to drive by and just look at the beautiful view.
it's our asset.
Great.
And, you know, right now, I just feel like while we're doing this, we also need to keep in mind, you know, the existing beautiful parkland. How do we preserve that while going forward?
So concerns around the existing foliage and making sure that we're staying on the root zones and protecting the trees was forefront on our path to get there. So the path that we've identified is the least invasive path, and I don't believe we're obstructing any mature trees. There's a couple of stragglers along the parkway that are already kind of on their way out, if you will, but nothing to the capacity of any of the older mature oaks or any of the older foliage. To the point as you look and you express your concerns around the views and vistas of the lake, I mean, Scott can attest, that was the number one concern that we heard through the entire Lakefront master plan was open up the views to the lake and one be able to see the lake and share the road. And as part of this project, the bluff restoration and the work that's being done will do just that. So what you're seeing, the overgrowth and everything else that has been deferred because this plan has been in the works coming for, unfortunately, longer than I care to say, has been deferred, but that is going to be taken care of as well. So your views from Elder into Lake Michigan, from Sheridan Road will be unobstructed.
And so for the planter here, where I feel like I hear a lot of different voices of concern, which all completely make sense, whether it seems like we need to decide whether the village, you know, the community want to swap the lands, because that gives us a continuous beach, but that comes at some kind of condition, right? It's not like you're just giving something and I'm getting something back. But as a small convention, we just have to decide whether we want that. And this planter, whether it's planter, steel, or stone, doesn't matter whether we do this land swap or not. We still have to come to the conclusion to do that.
You're right.
And is the planter the only way that we can have this potential secure beach, or we could do the stone, you know, as some people have suggested, but still do the land swap? Is that a no-go, or?
I wouldn't be able to speak on that, and I don't really think the board would be able to speak on that. That would be after the
I
discussion.
feel like that's part of, like, you know, that's part of the cost and benefit of the project.
Those are
But
things
just
that the
hearing
board has to
everybody
understand.
talk about stone as being a desirable possibility, which we all thought was not. We all thought center box was better aesthetically, and steel was cheaper, until steel got more expensive. So this is a very useful discussion for us.
Right, but my question also is, if we all decide, okay, rock looks prettier aesthetically, is that going to prevent us from actually having this continuous beach?
We have to ask.
Right.
Is that
Part of the conversation? Because everybody thinks this is prettier, it just haven't been discussed. Okay, then let's come to another, you know,
So it's after 9 o'clock, we started at 5. I'd like to give John Lewis the opportunity to present and suggest that we schedule another workshop. John?
Yes, good idea.
Mr. President, Professor Downing also submitted a presentation.
I was aware that, happy to accommodate anybody that's prepared a presentation before we adjourn.
Thank you.
So is there time for public comment? I just want to know what is going forward. I didn't get a chance to make my comment here. So I'm asking when there, because.
After the presentations, we have public comments and questions, so we'll have another opportunity for that. We'll hear from John and Chuck. Is anybody else preparing a presentation? Has anyone else prepared a presentation? Oh, sorry. How you doing, Chuck? Susan.
I appreciate that. John Root, 326 Woodland Avenue. Again, this is a lot of work went into this engineering diagram here. Actually, it's a product that Lauren had distributed out to the community. And basically what we're looking at here is a breakwater that goes out 225 feet, much like Floyd. And again, you've got your stone hubs that are sitting out there. Yellow would be the sand hill that you have within the area. And, you know, one of the points that I'm trying to make here. I'm thinking that the central breakwater, the T, went because we're not getting 261. At least we're planning on applying without having 261. And we certainly have to have that property in order to have, again, the central T. Also, within 261, you're going to be filling this whole area, you're required to fill up the sand. How do you fill sand on somebody's property who you don't have agreement with to go ahead and fill? So we've got to have Orchard 2020 in this plan, or we have to find another way, how to go ahead and proceed here without Orchard. And this will be a flow that I proposed for Elder Centennial. Repair and replace the gabion baskets on Elder. I don't know how much that would cost. Repair or remove the pier on Elder. And get all of this done in 2022. Let's go ahead and open up Elder Beach. As far as the Orchard issue, why don't we go ahead and file an eminent domain condemnation for the riparian rights on 261 and 205 Sheridan. At that point, then we don't have to worry about having Orchard approving any of our applications, the IDNR or the Army Corps. And I think that would probably take, again, 5 years. I don't know how long that litigation would take to go ahead and complete. And then commence your construction on Elder and Centennial in 2028.
Hey, John, a quick question. Any reason why you don't mention Centennial in your repair replace concepts?
Centennial's in fairly good shape. I mean, you're actually using Centennial now. You're not using Elder Lane. It's close.
I know.
That's it.
That's it? Okay. Thank you.
And I hope Chuck does not contradict me here.
There's two here. Which one would you like to go first?
Why don't we go to
Thank you very much for allowing me to speak. I want to congratulate Costa for withstanding all of the questions and doing such a great job. I'm not sure I should have done it without. I want to speak a little bit tonight about the master agreement, which I found in some of the materials that were made available to us. This is the unsigned document that seems to have been driving a lot of the imaginations that we've seen here in this particular project. While it hasn't been signed, I think that's been part of the mix of what has been attempted to do here. So what I have here on this slide is showing the 2016 plan on the left, and then the 2019 modification of the plan. It looks like it's shown at one of the park board meetings. Someone took a photograph of it. That's how I came by this. And I put them together so you can see that they're basically the same. There's a little more detail on the 2019 plan than there was on the. Okay, then I wanted to put all these drawings together. I remember some of you said, well, where's the property we now own? Where's the property we're going to have with these various plans? So I've got a sort of a triptych here. There's the 2019 before Ishbia is at the top, which is the one you saw on the right-hand side of that slide before. And then there's the 21 plan, which is Ishbia 1. And then there's the, I kind of have to assume this is Ishbia 2 because it still involves the land swap. Because the property you can see on the right-hand side is the left property that would be lost. There's also a loss of beach access on the left. So basically, we're winding up with less available beach after all of this property swap. Just to keep the geometry involved here in terms of what it is we're winding up with in terms of beach expanse. Then I want to talk about some of the graphical examples of the master agreement. These are elements to be paid for, maintained in perpetuity. If you read the long master plan, it's quite something to read. Quite an entertaining master plan. on how someone could take over the Park District. First of all, there's a 70, on the right-hand side, starting at the top, there's a 70-foot property exchange. And then there's a 70-foot easement restricting the use of that land, in addition to the property exchange. So basically, they get 140 feet, basically, in terms of what's actually going to happen on the land. And then there's, of course, the planter pocket, which was mentioned in the master agreement, by the way. This was not a happenstance. This was definitely in the plan all along with Mr. Ishia. And he mentions a wall specifically in the planter pocket paragraph. So I bring that to your attention. Then we have the boundary wall, which I find this, I can't really understand this, why he would build his fence, which is on his property, why that would be part of the master agreement unless he wanted his wall to be on the park land. So someone will have to explain to me how something that most property owners, is part of our property, it's not part of someone else's property, and therefore it wouldn't have had to be in the master agreement. So I'm really confused by that. Even though he was gonna pay for it, it seemed odd to me that it would be in the master agreement, but anyway. And then there's the special plantings required. It seemed odd to me that of all of the foliage that was added to this plan, it seems to be in that 70 feet of added, which he did say in the master plan that master agreement rather, he wanted certain things built there, certain mounds taken off, certain things done with his land that was not what he wished to have. And then the other thing I thought was interesting was the athletic fields are gone. He did say he didn't want any noise to do next to his property either, so I guess I would probably leave some of the athletic fields. But I don't know how much of this is still in the mix in terms of what we're doing, but I thought it might be interesting to see.
I need to address this. Chuck, the exchange agreement was entered into in October of 2020. That draft master agreement was served upon us on March 4th, 2021, and it's why we engaged a litigator. Nothing of that master agreement was or is now on the books. We absolutely rejected it. That's why we hired a litigator. That's why we prepared a notice or a suit for specific performance. That's why we're here today, a year later, because we as a board, right or wrong, walked right up to the line of filing a case for specific performance to enforce the original exchange agreement. And then we said, litigating with a billionaire might not be the best use of our funds. So 15, 16 months later, here we are, the loops are gone, all that master agreement off the table. There's no way we were going to submit to any of that. So this, what's been revealed through the FOIA request is some pretty hard negotiations that have gone on in an effort to safeguard the public, safeguard Winnetka. And I will tell you that what we have decided to move forward with is plan does not require Mr. Ishbia's consent, and the premise that Mr. Ishbia should be afforded the same property rights as any other Winnetka resident. That's where we started, and that's where we're going to end. Now, we also have to be respectful that Mr. Ishbia is our neighbor. We currently share 3 property lines with him. I don't think it is necessary or appropriate to antagonize a neighbor either way. We've certainly been antagonized in this process, and we were seeking to find a way through that doesn't involve litigation, that gives time and latitude for us to arrive at a plan that is mutually acceptable. Mr. Ishbia is, as maybe all of you don't know already, but since the last time that we met here on June 16th, Mr. Ishbia acquired another property, a 4th property at 195 Sheridan, and he's informed us of his intent to consolidate the 3 existing homes, tear them all down, and build his plan further south. Thus, he doesn't need the 70 feet. He's still offering to complete the exchange on his conditions. And on Friday of last week, he served up what you have to describe as a take it or leave it offer to us. This board is acting independently of that. We are giving consideration to Mr. Ishbia's new proposal, if you will, but we still have an exchange agreement. And we're gonna hear on the 21st from our attorneys as to our ability to enforce that exchange agreement. And we will again evaluate, is it worth it for us to pursue litigation? Or is it worth us to try and find a path through? Or is it just that we're done, we're just gonna walk away and move on? What we do have is a duty to the public to return to use Elder. Somebody said it, several people have said it. Elder's been closed for 3 years. That stormwater discharge is 75 years old. There are many unsafe conditions out there that need to be addressed. So this board is committed to moving forward, but on a time frame that would allow us to proceed in 2023. I don't think there's any expectation of our ability to move other than picking a few impediments out of the beach.
Mr. President, for the first time, I hear that we have council coming to a board meeting that was 3 days. I have complained since I joined this board that the board is not informed before things happen. Now, maybe some members of this board are very aware of this, but I right now would like to know who is coming, whether those attorneys have prepared some sort of summary.
You and I have been in discussions. You know that we've asked Steve Adams to talk to Julio, and you know
No,
that.
I don't know that, Mr. James. No, I don't know that. And I have been in discussions, yes, one discussion last Wednesday where Steve Adams was present, but there was absolutely no discussion about having Mr. Julio, I always mispronounce his name, I'm sorry, to come and again present. I'd like to know what the subject is.
Mr. Julio is not intending to come. We have our regular counsel, Steve Adams. He was at the last meeting. He's going to come to this meeting.
And he's going to give some sort of summary. I'd like to see, all I'm asking for is, I think it is only courtesy to the board that we know what the subject is and what his presentation will entail. That's all I'm asking.
And that will be presented on the agenda, and you will see it in advance.
Well, the agenda has to be by 5 p.m. tomorrow, I do believe.
Yep, we're waiting on that. We're waiting on that.
And so there will be some sort of summary brief or some sort, so we have some indication of what the
Yes,
subject is.
that's the intent.
Yeah, this is a lot for the community to also absorb in 48 hours. Thank you.
I appreciate your forthrightness in terms of, I guess, like saying, standing up to Mr. Ishbia to decide whether or not to proceed in the best interest of our town. I think that's great. I appreciate you doing that. I'd like to try to finish and then we'll.
Please.
So I'd like to talk a little bit about the planter pockets. One of my biggest concerns for this is that they are unprecedented. And if the park board were to go forward, they would be presenting this as a viable option to the IDNR, as something that meets all of the criteria, the mission statement of the park board to protect the lake and green space that we have. And I would hope that they would not do so, because I'm concerned that if you create a planter pocket that ties specifically to the elevation of the toe of the bluff, and you specifically mentioned that you're going to plant land-based plants in this, you're basically filling in Lake Michigan Lake. It's not just putting in rock that is a buffer protection. You're actually filling in Lake Michigan with land that will sustain growth of plant life that normally exists not in a lake environment. And I'm concerned that this sets a precedent, that if IDNR were to accept this, which they could possibly be, and then there would be more planter pockets up and down the lakeshore. And I don't think that would be good for Illinois, and I would hate to see the park district be the people who set this precedent. And I'd like to return a little bit to the planning. What I'd like to bring your attention to is Rosa Ragusa. How many of you have ever been to Nantucket? You've seen rose hips, haven't you? Have you ever tried to walk through those bushes? You cannot walk through those bushes. So these are not benign little plants that won't get in anybody's way. I can tell you they grow up to, I've seen them, they grow up to about this high. And they're at least this wide. And you can't walk through them. So they're basically, you might as well put barbed wire up and to create a fence to keep people from going across these planter pockets. So in fact, they do provide a barrier for entry, and the tall trees provide a barrier for the viewscape. So I'm really concerned that these things provide a precedent for this kind of growth and filling in of Lake Michigan. And lastly, I'd like to wonder a little bit about the breakwater and the expense. Lloyd breakwater is 225 feet, and the breakwater is 300 feet. And we've been talking a lot about the cost of planter pockets, steel and rock and whatnot and all. And I think it would really be a good idea to revisit the actual length of this rubble stone breakwater to reinvestigate that is necessary. I also think it'd be a good idea to look at the use of limestone. I think we mentioned that already, or close in where you don't have the problem of freeze thaw cycles. I applaud you for using granite or quartzite if the capability was by quartzite. And I think that's the best rock to use out there. We got freeze thaw cycles. I think that was a great idea. Now I have 2 more slides and I'll get out of here. Next.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see here. So one of the things I think we've been told tonight, and I agree with this, that Centennial and Elder have withstood the rigors of the last increase in the lake elevation, and they performed well. They protected the bluff. Both the gabions at Elder as well as the steel sheet piles where we were this evening did a very nice job. So I'm not too sure that we're not in the same conditions we were 2 or 3 years ago when we began trying to stabilize Lloyd Beach. I know how bad that was. I was there, and I want to tell you that was really horrific. You did a great job. We're very happy with the outcome. And makes it get better here. I wanted to, Warren just mentioned about how the lake level changes and rises and falls. I urge you to go to the Army Corps of Engineers. These graphs are available for you to look at. I provided them here for you. This was
A little line pointer, yeah.
Anyway, the second graph from the top is Lake Michigan. You can see it going up and down. The red line through that is the average. Thank you. So that's the average. That's the average elevation. Now I've enlarged the last portion of that Lake Michigan. And we all remember 1986, the left circle. That's when the last crisis occurred. And you can see it's very similar to the crisis we just went through in 2020, which is that circle over there. And you can see all of a sudden the lake level drops. So we're down to around 580, something like that. It rose a little bit, it might be around 580.2 or something. As Warren said, the lake level tends to rise a little bit during the summer. And, we don't know what's going to happen next year. We don't know. But I think statistically, we know things all collapse in the mean. And so statistically, it's likely to be around 180 statistically. Statistics don't matter if it's happened to be a bad year for you guys. So I've been to that. But however, I would say, given that the lake level is going down, the last time it was high, it went down for several years and then stayed down. Not that the weather would necessarily repeat itself. And I'm really not in the weather prediction business. I would hate to be doing that kind of business these days. But anyway, I would think that this is not the same kind of emergency situation that it was before. So I just hope you take that in hand as you continue your deliberations. And I appreciate you putting this workshop together. I think it's been a very great way to begin this interaction. I do think the comments that the gentleman over there brought up, that it would be a good idea to have multiple plans and maybe to have some sort of process, to define some sort of process so we can get how we can more proactively work together on this. Thank you very much for allowing us to work with you on this budget. Thank you.
Susie?
We're gonna try it this way. I'm a bit short. Thank you all for staying. Thank you to the present staff and the commissioners of the Winnetka Park District for your just incredibly long, work and your job, because this is not your only job. You have a few other pieces of park and programming for which you are responsible. And there are those of us who are here who have served in your capacity and understand it completely. But I'd like to summarize a little bit right now, because we all do need to get home. There are key points. We all do understand lake levels vary. We dealt with it in 1964 when it seemed like as a young teenager, or not a teenager, but in my early 20s, that we had to walk to Michigan before we could find any water. It was a very long haul across Tower Road Beach. But anyway, 64, then you go to 87, where we were standing on Centennial and part of the bluff fell down 15 feet of it the next morning, where we as commissioners had been standing before. So we deal with the lows back in 2013 and the highs, and now we know where we are today. We all know that there's wave impacts, which are stronger, that the lake bed has been scoured since these earlier issues, and we are in a different coastal hydrological situation with our shoreline, and we have more frequent storms. We also know that the 2030 plan is still 8 years out for having to complete it. We do have time, as many have noted tonight, to do this thoroughly and carefully. We have within our community and our greater Lake Michigan shoreline many groups who have been working since the mid-'80s on Great Lakes issues through the International Joint Commission, through the Lake Michigan Forum, through areas of concern. Obviously, that's my area of some knowledge. But one of the things that I think we have to make sure that we maintain is environmental justice. And you may not think of that in terms of our community of the Winnetka Park District, but we do have to manage for the macroinvertebrates, the frogs, the avians, the furry sorts, and for the humans, all of us using it. And environmental justice means views for all. It means this for the World War II veteran, the Vietnam veteran. It means it for everybody. It means it for the ADA community. And that means that you need, if you have a nice community advisory group that is comprised of members of these different portions of the community that can represent these views, and that we have an ADA specialist that we can call on, and we won't go into that right now, but we do have one who's volunteered their time, who is in a wheelchair and is familiar with the Great Lakes. But it's mental health for all of us, and our mental health is all of us being here and working cooperatively together and going forward and helping the Park District come to a healthy conclusion, and or not conclusion, but a healthy manner in which to formulate a plan to go forward. And I think you heard tonight some very thoughtful, easy ways to address some of the immediate concerns. And I think the Winnetka Park District Commissioners, I know those of us who have served, have a fiduciary responsibility to all Winnetka Park District residents. And the Winnetka Park District is greater than the village of Winnetka. It extends into portions of Glen Cove and Northfield, teensy weensy itty bitty bit of Glenview, and then some areas to the south. But we do have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure that we operate openly, follow all of the Winnetka Park District policy and procedure manual, guidance documents at all times, that we are totally open, and that even though we've all had to serve in capacities through COVID, that we go forward now openly, cooperatively, respectfully, thoughtfully, and I know we can do it. Like, we can all do it together, and thank you all for all of your interest in the Great Lakes.
Well, I have to apologize. I buried my mother-in-law yesterday. We're back because I think this is so important that you realize what you're all asking of us. And what you think. This, I believe, was 22 items. So this is 10 feet wall, exactly. I believe 10 feet wall. So, I believe then we have 10 of these guys in the way. Correct? Is that correct?
100 feet.
Yeah, okay. So can you just hold this really quickly, because I will, somebody? So I thought tonight we were doing a workshop, and I missed the beginning because the woman that I was with at the beach had a stroke over what was going on. Can you believe that? I can't write this story. God bless her. Let's hope she prays she's well. She's very upset. So, if you do a workshop, I thought you would ask us what we want, not what Ishbia wants, and present to us what we want. And Christina, you said something tonight that struck me, and it's not in my notes, but you said, so the rocks would be better than the planters. And the reason why is that the planters go on top of the stones, and then dune grass is usually, it can be varying sizes, but 6 to 8 feet. But what you're gonna do is you're gonna set a precedent that Mr. Ishbia said, that he would put 10-foot Kalari juniper conifers in that can grow to 20 feet. And other rugosa roses that are like barbed wire, and Chuck, I hate to contradict you, but they do grow about 10 feet wide and 6 to 8 feet high. And I'm 5'4". So we don't want planters, Christina. I would rather have rock. I also am incredibly, I feel like I've been in this with you guys for a long time, as a big time commitment. And when I look at those pockets, we gain 70 feet of property in the middle, but then we're putting planters on the beach that are 10 feet wide and 50 feet long on the beach. So I believe we lose 100 feet times 10 feet wide by 50 feet this way of beach. Now I know you're gonna fill that in. But it seems to me that we're losing like quite a bit of beach with that. But I have to tell you, to plant out into the lake, I have come to the point where I'm just gonna tell you how I feel, okay? I feel this is the most ridiculous plan I've ever heard of. I'm not even looking at my notes. This is absurd to plant plants in the lake and trees, and then have us maintain them. I'll bring my kayak over and deadhead the road. So I just feel like Ishbia will get a bigger wall. He'll get 300 feet. He'll get to have his planters, which is what we don't want. So if you get planters, he's going to get planters. The precedent on the lake, this is your legacy. And I really want you guys to think about that. Things are going to go everywhere. You get this done, he gets this done. The lake is ruined, and it's not anywhere on the lake. It's like Ishbia is winning. So you set your own precedent. You guys all said it. It's Lloyd. Lloyd is what you did well. And I thought tonight we would get to have more collaboration. Now we got to ask questions about your plan, but we've been asking questions about your plan, honest to God, for I don't know how long. 7 weeks, 10 weeks, seems like a really long time. I'm sure, Lauren, it seems longer for you. But we are at the point that, what do? And Warren, you you mentioned in the last couple of meetings, optionality. So you have $10 million that you have planned for this plan. Spend the 6.1, but pay for his property through eminent domain, and then spend $4 million for the wall on the north side that doesn't have planter pocket, and let him pay for his 125-foot wall on the south side. I mean, and if you want it to match, you can do whatever you want. I like the fact that you're doing it on your own property, but we want no wall. We want no planters. We don't want 6-foot-high dune grass on top of an already high wall. So it's very crazy to think that if the wall is lower than Lloyd, we're still going to put 6-foot dune grass in it. So it's even 6 feet higher. I don't understand why we aren't taking control of our park. It's our park. Ask us what we want, not what he wants. Let us say what we want in the workshop instead of you guys telling us over and over for 10 weeks what he wants. And don't make this your legacy.
I just have one comment. I appreciate Katie's question. I appreciate the voice of every single person in this room, because this is how it happens. This is how the sausage gets made. This is how we hear it. I'm a little bit opposed to just a smaller advisory board, because I like all of these different voices. And I think that all of these suggestions are informative to me and perhaps also to each other. So I would like to continue with a broader process. I know it's time consuming for everyone, but I do appreciate the variety of voices, and I do think there's something informative and educational for all of us. The second thing I would say is, I didn't know there were going to be presentations tonight, but I'm happy to listen to them, because I'm going to learn something. I'm going to understand what people think, and people have taken the time to prepare them, and I'm going to learn them. I didn't know that a lawyer was coming, and that's fine. I'm going to be flexible. I'm going to be open to this input. I'm going to listen to what everybody has to say. I'm not the nicest person in the world, please don't get me wrong, but I'm just saying, that's the job. And I think that people up here, I think Costa has listened to people, Costa has answered questions, commissioners on this board, we've tried to be open, we've tried to be patient, we've tried to be listening. Have we been perfect? No. But I think this process should go forward, and I like this multiple citizen input. I think it's really important.
I'd like to comment if I may. I want to thank everyone tonight for your time and your time for the past 6 to 7 weeks. I respect what you said, Commissioner, very much. At the same time, for over 6 weeks, I've been asking for cost information with regard to the proposal, and I understand it's a moving target cost. However, I also think that some people have seen that. I have never seen any of it. Secondly, as far as being flexible, I'm very flexible. I simply want to have advance notice and an opportunity as a commissioner to review things before they suddenly appear at a meeting. And so if we have legal counsel who is coming to present something, I'd like to know what that is, and I'd like to be able to read it or see it. That's all I'm requesting. Again, I think the framework of having people come and give comments is what the community has asked us. They've asked us to be open, they've asked us to be transparent, and for a variety of reasons, for over a year, that didn't happen, but look, we're here tonight, we're trying to do it. So again, thank you very much for everyone's time, particularly the board here. Thank you for yours, and staff, Costa, Molly, Libby, thank you. Kyle is here, thank you. It's a lot of hours, so thank you very much.
May I just say one thing?
Mary,
You talked about the Park District and being a good neighbor. I will tell you that in my experience, and it's been for a long time, I never saw the Park District fail as a neighbor at all our parks. I mean, whether it was going in a fence or whatever. I think that we have bent over backwards to be a good neighbor. And so I think we'll just carry that tradition through, but I would not like to see any special favors given to certain neighbors when we're trying to be a good neighbor to all, everyone.
Eric, you want to go? It's not the topic du jour, but love being at Centennial Lloyd today. If you're a dog beach advocate out there, I'd just like to share my perspective on it. I don't even know if it's possible. I don't even know if anybody would agree with me. I would just put it out there that I think at some point in the near future, every beach at Winnetka should permit dogs. And I think you should be able to bring your dogs out before 9 and out after 5. And if that can work within the framework of the Winnetka Park District, I think that's a natural transition that we should go and follow the leads of states like Florida, South Carolina, California. I don't know if it's permissible. I don't know if the village will agree. Maybe it'll be a big liability issue. I don't know. But love seeing Elda today. Love seeing people out there with their dogs. I love seeing Lloyd and all their families out there enjoying a big, wide, expansive beach. To me, that's the opportunity. And there's enough for everybody. And we're not trying to single any specific groups out and have them miss out. So just my random comment for the night. Please, Mrs. Harris.
I think many people are doing that now. And
I know they are.
And I'm all for that. I don't have a dog, but I'm all for that. But how about cowboys? I think they can be allowed on any of the beaches. Why just at Lloyd? There's something the kids like them, and Lloyd is turning into a swimming beach because they could take a paddleboard out there and swim. I think that's something that could be allowed
It's
in power also.
Mary, it's almost 10 o'clock. My sense is that we're gonna have another workshop session because there's still input, but I'd like to get more out to you comment before we adjourn for tonight. And I don't know if representatives of HB want to speak or not. Oh, thank you. Dave? No comment.
Sorry, I would agree a lot with what Christina said earlier. To get as much input as we possibly can.
Louder, please.
You need my, sorry, I'm recovering from COVID, so this is not as good as I hear it.
Yeah, can you hear me now? So I would agree with what Christina said, that I would certainly be in favor of as much community input as possible. Your beaches, we understand that. We want to do the right thing. My personal opinion is I don't think this board is going to bend or yield to any one person. We're going to do what we believe is the right thing to do in this community. And if it takes a week, if it takes 6 months, however long it takes, that's what we're committed to do. That's my comment.
Thank you.
Is this on? Yeah. Okay. I'm going to be short since it is 9:45. I do want to express my sincere appreciation for everyone who has participated in this meeting, as well as many, many previous meetings to express comments. I wanted to just summarize what I am hearing from a customer and user perspective, because I feel like we've spent a lot of time on the engineering perspective, and what I'm hearing from a customer perspective is that views and access are very important. And so I think that, with product design and product development, starting with what the customer wants is a good place to start, and then having the engineering requirements flow from that. Because I think that if we take the customer-centric approach and have the engineering requirements evolve, yes, it will create design challenges, but from those design challenges come innovation and create the opportunity for us to have the best beaches that meet the needs of our community and give the community a real sense of ownership and pride in our facilities. And we have seen that be successful in other communities. And I think that, you know, the community buy-in is really important for our projects. So thank you. And thank you to all my board members for listening and engaging more thoroughly with the community, because I know it has been you know, exciting and a challenge. It has required a lot more, you know, commitment than expected, but that's positive. That's how we get stronger. So thank you.
Thank you. You all have heard enough of me tonight. So I'm going to suggest that we look at our calendars and see if we can agree the next workshop. Sometime in our, for everybody's knowledge, our next meeting is Thursday. We'll be back right here. We have a very full agenda. Believe it or not, there are other things going on in the Park District of great importance. We've heard about the stormwater that involves the rework of our golf course. We're contemplating bringing in outside third-party management. We'll be discussing that on Thursday. You know, we're building 2 new paddle courts, and we'll be discussing that. And we have still other matters that are on the agenda. Our staff has been working tirelessly to put these meetings down. So, then we agreed we would consider this topic, but also proceed with the other business on the 21st and come back for another workshop session. I'm looking at either August 4th, which is Thursday, or August 8th, which is a Monday. Does anybody have a preference? Do we pull the board? We can't do the 8th. Let's look at your calendars and discuss this on the 21st. Let's look for
I have to have a conflict on the fourth, so I'm not sure maybe a non-voting workshop session.
workshop.
Maybe Dan, with everyone here.
Workshop.
Okay. But I'd be happy as an offset to do another chat with the commissioner to get their feedback. I was doing. Okay.
All right. What works? We'll pursue that. We'll be back here in this room in 3 nights. We have a motion to adjourn. So moved. Second. Call, please.
Commissioner Campbell,
Yes.
Commissioner Coyle, Commissioner James,
Yes.
Commissioner Watson.
Yes.
Commissioner Ridgeway.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think we can heard of it.